Good evening, everyone. I'm Ravi Kapur from our Silicon Valley studios with Diya TV's election coverage here in 2022. In 2020, it was unusual with the pandemic in full fleet for everyone to experience. But this time out, things are seemingly get back to normal. We have more in-person balloting, as well as folks that are mailing things in around the country. And that's changed the dynamics from 2020. It seemed as if we have a different sense of momentum here with the midterms, of course, in 2020. The Democrats took the House, the Senate, as well as the White House. But usually in these off years, in even years like in this one, that usually means that the opposition party, in this case the Republicans, have an opportunity to pick up momentum from the last 2 years. And that seems to be the case tonight, as already at the close of the polls at 8 p.m. Eastern on the East Coast, we have some seats that have flipped from the Democrats to the Republicans. We'll get into all those details as this show progresses. We're going to be on live with you for 3 hours and bring on a lot of voices from around the country that we don't often get a chance to talk to. There's a lot of Indian Americans and South Asians throughout this nation that are involved in politics at the local level. We have people that are fundraisers. We have folks that are getting the vote out. We also have people entering state politics, federal politics. And it's been an exciting progression to see over in recent years. You know, just a few years ago, we had no representation in Congress. And quite possibly tonight, there may be another Indian American heading to Congress. We'll be watching Shri Thanedar. He has an opportunity to win his race in Michigan. We'll be watching that race very closely. And if indeed he does win tonight, we hope to get a chance to talk to him, as well as take a live look at his acceptance speech. So we're going to be monitoring Shri Thanedar in Michigan, as well as bring on a whole bunch of folks that are existing elected officials and folks looking to get into higher office, as well as people who maybe fell a little short during the primary run, but didn't get an opportunity to battle things out here in the fall, but will likely be a face to look out for in the years to come. Let's take a look now at some of the races that we are monitoring nationally. Of course, the House, most folks have kind of indicated that this was going to go to the GOP. The Democrats had a very slight margin in the House over the last couple of years, and it seems as of right now, the GOP have picked up a net of 3 seats. They have 180 seats to 120 as of the current data. This will continue to get updated as, obviously, the polls in the Midwest have now closed. So we'll get some of those results from the Midwest as time progresses. We know on the East Coast, the big announcement that was made right at 8 p.m. Eastern is that both the Senate and the governor, the races in those matchups in Florida, will go to the GOP. Ron DeSantis will hold his seat as governor of Florida. Of course, DeSantis is a very likely presidential candidate. If not in 2024, certainly in 2028. He could be even a vice presidential pick. He's someone obviously to look out for, and we hope to have a gentleman that was actually at the victory party for DeSantis tonight, Danny Gaekwad, who's been a GOP fundraiser and someone very involved in Florida politics, a very interesting guy that we wanted to get his perspective on Florida and the political ramifications in that state. And of course, in the Senate as well, we have Marco Rubio, who has held on to his seat in Florida. So Florida has actually even gone further to the right than we had seen in previous years. It was a pretty significant victory, margin of victory for both of those men. So the GOP will hold those seats. And these, every single seat, especially in the Senate, is very important. We have a 50-50 deadlock in the U.S. Senate. And right now, the key races that we'll be monitoring is Ohio, where J.D. Vance is taking on Tim Ryan. And Vance, as you may know, not only is he a Republican, but he's married to an Indian American woman who's an attorney, Usha Vance. And they have a very interesting story. We've profiled it on Diya TV in recent months. But J.D. Vance, from what we understand, has an opportunity to pick up that seat in Ohio for the U.S. Senate. And that would actually potentially not just bring him to a larger national platform, but elevate his wife, who's a prominent attorney in her own right. So we'll monitor that race out of Ohio. And of course, Pennsylvania, another really significant race tonight. John Fetterman taking on Dr. Mehmet Oz. We actually had Dr. Oz come on Diya TV in the last few weeks. In fact, we've had a lot of political leaders in recent weeks join us on the air because they knew how contentious this midterm session was going to be. And so Dr. Oz came on with us a few weeks ago, as well as Don Bolduc, the Brigadier General who is running in New Hampshire. So far, the polls in those races, when it comes to Bolduc, he is losing right now to Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire. Hassan is the Democrat. Dr. Oz, though, it seems as if he's really neck and neck. It might be really a truly kind of 50-50 split, with perhaps Oz peaking at the final push here, as Fetterman has struggled. You know, he's had some health challenges in recent months, and Dr. Oz has messaging. He's been targeting different segments, including Indian Americans and Hindu Americans, and so he came on to talk about some of his initiatives. And one of the initiatives that he talked about with me on our public affairs show, The Public Interest, was what he would want to do with the green card backlog. It's something that we've been discussing for many, many months, and it does seem to be a bipartisan issue where both the GOP and the Democrats want to work across party lines to get something done, because we do have 250,000 Indian American children that are here legally. Their parents get legal documentation through their visa process, but some of these kids are born overseas at a very young age. They come over, and then by the time they turn 21, if they have not received their full paperwork, they actually have to self-deport. It's kind of a very, very challenging situation for hundreds of thousands of Indian Americans and folks from all over the globe. So we're going to be monitoring that race, and Dr. Oz certainly told us that that is something that he would want to get taken care of, addressed, if he gets elected, and he has an opportunity to get elected tonight. And also, we did talk to President Trump back in September in Bedminster, New Jersey, and he also told us that that is something that would be on his agenda. So the good news is, it does seem to be something that both the right and the left are pushing together, and we need to, hopefully find these common points to work together, because we are living in a very fractious society right now, and it's very difficult to get any kind of agenda passed. And so if you notice the momentum swing, obviously coming into this year, we noticed that the Republicans seem to have an opportunity to gain seats, but then President Biden passed legislation that seemed to be very positive throughout the country. And so that's why we have such an up and down kind of cycle. But here we are towards on election night. And, this is all about momentum and, of course, messaging. And so we'll see whose messaging was most effective. Certainly, the abortion battle is one that we are going to, that was certainly a flashpoint in this race. And certainly we'll see if the turnout for women around the country are going to push things over the edge for the Democrats, who want to maintain the Roe v. Wade standard that was set 50 years ago, or if things are going to shift in another direction. And so we're going to talk to a number of political officials here on this broadcast, and we're going to start off tonight with someone that we want you to know from Michigan. Padma Kuppa is going to join us. She is based in Michigan, actually in the middle of a race right now, and I wanted to bring her on the program here to discuss her race and really just get folks to get to know her a little bit better as we start this program here off Coast to Coast here on Diya TV, on air and online. Padma, are you able to connect with us? We really appreciate you joining us. Are you on location somewhere? I don't hear you. Can you hear me, Padma? It does. Yeah, I can't hear you, Padma. Do we have an audio for Padma on this monitor, perhaps? Let's see if we can get Padma here. It seems like you're calling us from a cell phone, which we appreciate. There we go. I can hear you now. Padma, thank you so much for being with us, especially here on election night. I know we're flagging down elected officials from around the country that are going from party to party, venue to venue. In fact, one of the folks we were going to have on here in this 6 p.m. hour on the West Coast is Ash Kalra. He told me he has to come in a little bit later because he's still knocking on doors here in California to get the vote out as the polls close at 8 p.m. Pacific. So we still have active political leaders going out there trying to get voters out. Tell me about your process. And by the way, introduce yourself to folks, because I'm sure there's a lot of people around the country that don't know you or your background and what your race is tonight. Well, we really appreciate it. Padma, what's been fascinating for us to watch is Michigan, the evolution of Michigan. It's become a real purple state, a very important state for both parties to capture. How's your messaging? How have you been able to capture the imagination of the voters out there? I'm sure it's not easy as being a minority, female, and obviously it's a very diverse state. What have you done that's resonated with the voters out there?
And access to opportunity. Also talking about, I'm an engineer. I immigrated to the United States after getting my bachelor's in mechanical engineering and eventually made my way with a young family to Michigan 21 years ago. And I worked in the auto industry. I grew up in the United States. My parents had a graduate degree, so I have the immigrant experience with the American accent. And so my husband and I started here at the city of Detroit, and a great schools and great community services. We've seen the quality of those services fall because our state legislature over the last 30 or 40 years has underfunded public education, underfunded city and local government, so libraries and parks and all the other services that families want. We're having nickel and dime taxpayers and property for that. And so those are the things I talk about. The pathways for middle class, affordable colleges, skilled trades, all of these things are important. And I think women reproductive health is also an important thing. But with immigrants, it's across the spectrum. It's not necessarily, again, a monolith. It's not the number one issue. There are as many people who will be anti-abortion as are pro-abortion in some of the communities that we're talking about.
Well, Padma, before we let you go, I wanted to get your perspective on tonight's outcome. Obviously, things are still in the balance. We're unlikely to get a final result tonight. But certainly, as a Democrat, you have a different perspective. We have a lot of folks thinking the GOP is at least going to take one body of Congress. Tell me about your thoughts on the midterms, the Biden administration, and how you navigate a very contentious political environment.
Sure, we really focus on local issues, and we state legislature can do. Because we've seen time and again that the Supreme Court is taking rights away, making sure that those rights are decided at the state level. So we need to have state legislatures that step up and don't take away our freedoms, whether it's voting rights or women's rights or so many other things. And so, for me, particularly,
I think we may have just lost Padma, but I think.
so this is the first time I've had a 10 different commission that's drawn the Michigan State Senate. It is right for Democratic majority, and this seat that I'm running for is one of the 9 or 10 seats that would bring us to a Democratic majority for the first time in almost 40 years in Michigan. And so we would be there along with Big Rick, everyone knows who he is, our governor. He needs a chamber that can have.
All right. Well, I think we lost Padma because of the internet connection. She's actually did us a big favor by coming on a little bit earlier than scheduled. Can you hear me now, Padma?
I can hear you now. How much
Okay.
of what I said did you lose?
We lost a chunk of it, but that's perfectly okay. We understand. I mean, obviously, it's you got a party to go to, and I know a lot of folks wanted to come a little bit later. We're going to have a really packed show as this thing evolves, because we have a whole bunch of people at parties around the country, watch parties, to throw in their own parties. It's been really interesting as we add more guests on. But we'll let you go, Padma Kuppa from Michigan. Thank you so much. Look forward to having you on again in the future, and thank you so much for swinging by. All right, we will move forward now. We have another guest for you who's really in the trenches of this whole political dynamic, and that is Chanda Parbhoo, who's running this organization called Save Texas. Chanda, it's so great to see you again. I know you came on in 2020, last time out. Obviously, things are a little bit different in 2020. We had this blue upsurge between Biden and the House and Senate. This time out, it does look like the GOP has an opportunity to recapture the House. Give us your thoughts on this race, and obviously being in Texas, which has largely been a red state. You're a Democratic supporter trying to get South Asians out to vote in Texas, and you've done a heck of a job. I see the mobilization. Tell folks about what you're doing just to get our community engaged.
Yeah, so when our organization started in 2017, and when we approached candidates or even the party, nobody kind of knew what to do with us, because we had infrastructure already in place for the African American community, the Latino community, but as far as South Asians go, we didn't really have any infrastructure or any resources. And so we've been continuously fighting that battle on what it means to have representation in Texas for South Asians. And that kind of leads us, we've made huge inroads since then. People are now beginning to understand what a South Asian is. And I think largely having Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket and having that identity as a South Asian definitely helped identify who we are. And as AAPI, we are the fastest growing minority population around the country, definitely in Texas. South Asians specifically are the fastest growing minority in Texas, and we've made huge strides in connecting to candidates as well as elected officials, and trying to make sure that they understand our issues and what our concerns are. It's been a long battle, and I think we've made some huge strides in bringing our community together in the 2022 election.
Chanda, tell me about the Beto O'Rourke race. I know he was taking on the incumbent governor, Greg Abbott. I know you have a close personal relationship with Beto, and I saw a video where he just today dropped your name on a video. So tell me about that particular race, and namely, you know, what you're doing, you know, your messaging, because I know it's hard to reach people in this environment. There's all this noise. What kind of stuff do you do to get folks out to vote?
I think making that personal connection on why midterms are important. I know that as a community, we're really good at presidential voting. 75% of our community came out to vote. in the 2020 election. And so the challenge that we have facing with this election is really trying to identify the moments that are important to us. The women have definitely come out of the woodwork and coming to make a stand. We have had a lot of people who are normally on the sidelines and are now, putting my reach on that. This is really horrible, especially our physicians. We have a lot of people in the who are in the healthcare industry, doctors or nurses.
Close the door.
We just have a very large population in the healthcare industry. Doctors are coming to me and saying, I don't know if I can help my patients with the care that they need because I'm afraid of going to jail if I say the wrong word. And then we had a whole bunch of students who said, I don't want to go to school in Texas as a medical student. I don't want to be a healthcare professional in Texas at all. Some people are saying I don't even want to be a gynecologist anymore in this country. And so I think for that particular market, this election was very personal to them. And it was, these are issues that are going to have a rippling effect in not only Texas, but the entire country. So these are people that kind of stood on the sidelines last time, and now they were 100% in making sure that we get the right people elected.
Chanda, before we let you go, any final thoughts on these particular elections? And obviously, it seems like some of the folks that you were supporting are going to fall short tonight.
I'm going to wait until the very end. We've got some really challenging things ahead of us. We've got Harris County, which is currently going over some issues. The polling locations are open till 8 o'clock. So while the statistics look a little bit low for us right now, I think we just have to hang on until the very end. Only 50% of Dallas County is reporting in, and a very small percentage of some of our big counties with South Asian populations are coming in. So we've got a long night ahead, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed. Everybody in our community did everything that we could possibly do. We were making phone calls, we were texting, we were talking to voters at their homes, we were hosting parties. We did everything that we could, so I'm pretty confident that we're going to have a really good turnout.
All right, Chanda Parbhoo from Safe Texas, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us, and we're going to keep going rapid fire here. We have guest after guest after guest lined up here. As you can tell, we have a lot of folks engaged from coast to coast. We have a big country, and as our network has spread around the country to more than 20 plus cities, we've got a chance to interact with all kinds of folks. Some of them we've gotten a chance to meet at Indian American Impact, which is a Democratic-leaning organization where you have all these upstart candidates. And one of them we met recently over the summer is joining us now, Victoria Virasingh, who ran for Congress in Virginia. Victoria, it's great to see you on this broadcast. I appreciate you pull yourself out of another election night party. We've had all these folks coming to and from events around the nation. We just went from Michigan to Texas to Virginia. I mean, you can see how widespread our community is. Give us your thoughts, actually, and please introduce yourself to folks who maybe weren't paying attention to your congressional race this summer.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It was such a delight to see that I'm so excited to be able to just have a little bit of time to delve into what we're seeing right now. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Victoria Virasingh. I ran in this past cycle in Democratic primary in the 8th district. That's the Northern Virginia area. I am a native of Virginia, although my grandparents are Punjabi, and my mother is from Africa. So, I'm just looking at these early results. Obviously, the is called having a particular eye towards Virginia, but looking at other states and other areas, and it's going to be a tough night for us Democrats. And frankly, I think this could be a wake-up call. I think this could signal some real discussions over the values that we hold as a party, the pipeline of candidates that we want to introduce, and ultimately have a really strategic plan forward as we look ahead towards 2024.
Victoria, I mean, as a candidate, now I know you ran against someone who was very entrenched in Congress, and I think that's been an issue we've had historically for folks of our generation. I think I might have a few years on you, but really I don't have a whole lot of representation for my generation either. I mean, we have a whole bunch of folks that are in Congress for decades. Tell me about that dynamic. When you're talking to voters, you're meeting people. Did your message connect with folks, or I mean, when you're in the trenches like that? Tell me about what you had to do just to get their attention.
Absolutely. And I will just say, we as a campaign focused on everyday issues. We focused on jobs, we focused on working hard, we focused on education. We talked about what it's like to live today in today's district. Frankly, that messaging is largely absent from national party messaging. I think candidates themselves can bring those into their own campaigns and races, but unfortunately what we lack as a party is an organizational structure and messaging that speaks to very core issues that most Americans go through every day.
So, Victoria, give me a sense of how you actually classified yourself. I had a nice conversation with Rishi Bagga, who is running for a House seat in Florida, and he is trying to be the first Indian American or South Asian ever to get elected to the Florida legislature. And he said that he is branding himself as a centrist, even though a lot of folks would call him a liberal. We have a lot of folks that are going far to the right, a lot of folks going far to the left. What connects you to the voters today? Do they like to hear folks being kind of polarizing and being far to the left or far to the right, or do you think something in the middle can still work?
What we discovered, obviously, people want to leave. They meet you, they want to know what bucket are you in, on the right or on the left. And really, what I sort of realized, we have a community here that we have a ton of immigrants and immigrants. This district is around a little bit more than half of the district is white Caucasian, but the rest is a mix of everything. As a daughter, to immigrants, someone who belongs to the South Asian community, obviously we started communities that were close to us. And what I discovered was that when you talk to people and when you listen to what their feelings are today, we all want a shared goal. I think there are a rise of misinformation in Virginia elections every single year. It's exhausting, especially if you're working a lot of jobs, if you're busy, you don't have that much time to dedicate. So, when it came to labeling, I felt like we really just spoke to individual needs, we spoke on issues, and it really helped us bring, frankly, a whole set of first-time voters, first-time new Americans, young people who just turned 18. I mean, we brought so many new voters into the Democratic process just by running in a primary, and that is what really excites me, because I know there's a difference I've seen it. Like, I have talked to people who have conservative values and end up voting for me because we found alignment on the same issues. I had people who had just become an American, have been registered to vote for me, not because I had a Democrat next to me, but because of the issues that we were talking about. I think that's key. I think if we can return to that, not piecemeal and it's just doing their own thing, but as a party structure, just imagine the returns on that simple investment.
So finally, Victoria, I know it's a busy night for everyone, so I want to let you go with this. You ran for Congress. You came up a little bit short. I know there was a young lady back in 2016 that we had on that's pretty well known in the community now, Jennifer Rajkumar. She fell short in 2016 and did the election night special with us, and here she is really becoming a star in New York State. Are you going to be running once again for office in the next cycle?
I think this election when we started was, I still have people come up to me and they talk about the inspiration that our campaign brought. So I think there's a lot of work to do. Right now I see so much potential in Virginia, but much part of bringing us closer to representing people's interests. So I'm excited for that, and I'd love to continue having conversations and working towards really unifying us as people both Virginia and nationally, and see what comes next.
Victoria, it's great to see you. Congratulations on running a strong campaign. I know it's hard to take on an incumbent, but you put out a great first effort, and we certainly look forward to hearing from more of you in the years to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Victoria Virasingh, look for her, as I don't think her political career is going to end this year alone. Now we're going to get to someone who understands the race really in totality in all 50 states, and that's Christine Chen from APIA Vote. Christine, it's great to see you as always. I'm really appreciative you can sneak away for a few minutes here on election night to tell us about all your good works. I know you are in the trenches. I get some of your emails, and I saw an unbelievable get out the vote effort to reach Asian Americans. I want you to share that with folks because I don't think anyone realizes how elaborate your operation and others like it have become.
Yes, thank you so much. You know, it's been really exciting because over the decade, we've really been able to build the capacity of AAPI nonprofits to do this work in 28 states. And this year alone, we were able to reach over 1 million households by sending them 2 rounds of mail and then following up with phone banking, text banking, and then in some locations, even door to door canvassing. It's just really exciting to see that as soon as the translated mail gets landed in a household, then our 888 API Vote hotline actually gets hundreds of phone calls. So it really is a whole wraparound service that we're really providing. And that's why you see the 2020 numbers as well as now as we are, winding down the 2022 cycle, you've seen the results of all of our efforts in terms of increasing the voter registration and turnout rates from our community. Already in the early vote numbers, we're already surpassing our numbers from the 2018 election cycle.
So, Christine, it's hard to motivate people to vote in the midterms historically. What are some of the kind of hot button issues that propel people to come out to vote this time out?
Well, it's actually quite similar to other communities: jobs and economy, education, healthcare access, crime. But when we look at those issues, we also have to realize that the experience of Asian American voters is also through the lens of a increase of anti-Asian violence and sentiment. So even as they view and approach these candidates, they're also looking to see what kind of solutions will they have in making sure that we actually reduce the increases of this anti-Asian sentiment. This is also especially true with young voters, where 43% of young voters noted that they feel like they're being attacked just because of their race.
So, Christine, with AAPI hate being a really significant issue, one that we're covering quite extensively here at Diya TV, was that a message that one party over the other was pushing, or both parties seem to have consensus that this kind of hate needs to end?
Well, in our 2022 Asian American voter survey, we noted that Indian Americans and Asian Americans overall would actually support more Democratic candidates if they actually leaned in and talked more about how they were going to fight against anti-Asian hate. So, it's really resonate as more of a message for the Democratic candidates. It's actually still a mixed message in regards to what we're seeing in terms of how the Republicans or the conservative parties are utilizing that. We are starting to see some misinformation mailers going out that's actually talking a little bit more about anti-Asian hate and who they're actually trying to blame for actually causing the rise of this anti-Asian violence.
Now, APIA Vote is a nonpartisan organization. How do you, navigate all this when obviously passions are really strong on both sides, and you have so many contentious issues that are driving election 2022? When you're out there, I mean, how, tell me about how you and your team handle this approaching folks.
Well, we know that one of the biggest barriers for our community is that they've actually many times a large segment, which is made up of first generation immigrants, have never been approached about registering and voting. So we know the very basics, especially coming from a nonpartisan organization, is very helpful in terms of getting into households and institutions where partisan organizations are not able to actually access. So many times we're the first point of entry for the community to get involved and to understand politics and policy and the importance of voter participation and civic participation. It's our job to actually get them into the system and then actually turn them into regular voters. Because many times elected candidates and also elected officials, they're actually only going to be targeting high propensity voters, those that actually vote on a regular basis. So we actually we have an important job to actually turn those folks into those type of voters, and then also to get the attention of the elected officials and the candidates and the political parties.
So, Christine, anything you want to highlight before we let you go? Some surprises, anything out there that you found different here in 2022 versus previous efforts?
Actually, if anything, it's like a stronger indication of what we did right in 2020 is actually continuing on for 2022. Back in the presidential election cycle, almost 3 out of 4 Asian American voted early or by mail. We're also seeing a strong indication that is still the preferred way as we, close out the 2022 cycle. And this is actually also indication that we have high interest in this particular election. A lot of the conditions that really led our community to understand the importance of the elections really came from understanding that the pandemic and decisions being made by elected officials really impact our lives, and it's still true today. And I think that's why many of our community is highly motivated to actually come out. So as we head into looking at the close races and who's actually going to be the winners tonight, as well as in a week from now, as we continue to count the ballots. We believe that the Asian American Pacific Islander electorate actually is playing a large, important role in terms of those wins.
And actually, I'd be remiss to let you go without asking. Indian Americans historically were not going to vote. Yeah, that's changed in recent elections. Do you have any indication that we have more Indian Americans and South Asians turning up to vote and getting really engaged in the process?
I mean, overall, once again, we've seen consistently the last 10 years with our Asian American voter surveys that Indian Americans continue to actually lean in and actually increase their participation along with other Asian American voters. So as I indicated, we're seeing that all indications are showing that we will surpass the numbers from the 2018 midterm elections. So
All
very
right,
exciting
Christine.
news. Thank you.
Really appreciate having you on once again. Christine Chen from APIA Vote. Always great to get information on what's going on the ground level, because a lot of these races are, in fact, not just, certainly things have become nationalized. I really think things have shifted because of social media. You get flashpoints going on from city to city to city, and it impacts races around the nation. But there are folks that really work at the grassroots level to turn out the vote, and APIA Vote is one of those groups that goes out and have done a great job at getting Asian Americans more involved in the political process. Now we're joined by Manka Dhingra from great state of Washington. We're very pleased to have you on, Manka, because Diya TV just recently launched in Seattle this year. In fact, we haven't made a whole, we really haven't promoted it much, but we're on in Seattle. It took us more than a decade to get on there, and it's great to be on in Washington State. So, Manka, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
So take me through election night for an elected official. Obviously, there's some folks that we had, I was saying earlier, Ash Kalra was going to join us at the top of the show, and he was still knocking on doors. He's like, can I come on a little bit later? For you, I mean, and obviously there's a whole bunch of other elected officials that we hope to have on later in the program. They're attending watch parties. Some people are throwing their own events. Some folks are attending larger ones. What has been your role here in election 2022? And obviously for our folks around the nation who may not know your background, your history, and what you're doing in Washington State, tell folks about what you're up to in Washington.
Thank you. Excited to do so. So I actually ran for office for the first time 5 years ago and was elected. And I became the first senator who is a Sikh American. And I thought in the last 5 years, maybe we would have more of us, but I still continue to be the only Sikh American elected legislator in the country. And I'll say, 5 years ago, that election was pivotal because Washington Senate was controlled by the Republicans by 1 seat. And so when I won, I flipped control of the Washington State Senate. And so that election night party definitely was very different. Now here in Washington, we are very excited to make sure that the Democrats keep control of the U.S. Senate. We are hoping in the U.S. House that we can at least flip one seat and send another Democrat to the House in DC. But it is exciting. I think there's a lot of people very optimistic about what's going to happen in Washington. Our election night party has already started down in Bellevue, and I'll be joining them right after I finish speaking with you.
Oh, that's terrific. We have actually a lot of folks in Bellevue that tune us in, and we have some colleagues up there. We actually have been covering Seattle quite a bit because Pramila Jayapal obviously became the first Indian American woman in Congress. And certainly Shama Sawant has made a name for herself with her efforts in city council. How do you navigate Washington politics? I find it's not typical. I mean, I'm a Californian, so we think of blue states like California, but Washington seems it has a different dynamic than maybe even California.
It really does. The state of Washington actually looks like the map of the US when it comes to the way politics are. So, Pramila, Shama, they all represent Seattle. I represent the East Side. So these are the cities of Redmond, Sammamish, Kirkland, Duval. So where a lot of people who have a background in technology, the upper middle class, live. So the politics, even in Seattle versus East King County, are very different. And so our state is very diverse. You have many in the middle part of the state that are very conservative. And then you have the liberal west side of the state. And then you have a few pockets of liberal east side. But, the most populous area is King County. And that is where you see a very heavy Democrat concentration. But it's up and down the I-5 corridor. And, we have a long history of Indians being in Washington, very similar to California, especially when you take a look at the Sikh population and when they came to the US. And I think there with Yuba City and that area has some similarities with the Bellingham area in Washington.
Well, we certainly know all about the Bellingham situation with the Sikh community going back 100 years. And for all the folks that have throughout that Central Valley corridor, there's a very strong connection up and down all the way to Vancouver, frankly, a very large Punjabi population up and down the West Coast. I would be remiss not to ask about some of the issues that we see because, we have a friend of ours that we've launched a new television show with who is based in Seattle, and he covers the homeless epidemic. And it seems like it's gotten very extreme in Seattle proper, but even throughout the state. How do you handle this stuff when, you have this dichotomy of you've got the mayor, you've got obviously local prosecutors, you've got the federal officials, and you're a state official. How do you guys work together to kind of shift the dynamics? Because certainly I think some of the images out of Seattle are starting to really resonate around the country where people are looking at Seattle in a different light because you do have a lot of folks that have done incredibly well in tech, and yet there's a lot of folks that are being left behind.
And that's exactly why when you talk about the homeless population, you really have to take a look at that entire spectrum of why are people in homelessness. So you have individuals who are chronically homeless, and those many of them are the ones that are dealing with behavioral health issues, mental illness, substance use disorder. And so the strategy in addressing that is very different than those individuals who actually end up being homeless because they lost their apartment. Many of these individuals actually have jobs. And one of the main reasons for people going into poverty is actually medical debt. So really trying to make sure we have strategies around providing affordable healthcare, making sure that we're actually able to provide individuals with resources to keep their apartments for a month or two, because many times people just need a few months before they can get back on their feet. So, different strategy for the chronic homeless population, really different strategy for those who are at risk of becoming homeless. And then you got to have a different strategy on making sure you have affordability. And this does become problematic because you do have the uber wealthy and they are simply just able to pay more. And so taking a look at housing inventory and making sure we are actually able to provide, like wraparound services for the chronic homelessness, affordable housing for individuals, and then really making sure when we talk about affordability, affordability is based on that region, not necessarily statewide. Because I can tell you in the area that I live, A home starting is over $1 million. If you want to rent an apartment, you're looking at monthly rents of like $3,000 or $4,000. So affordability in my area is very different than affordability in other parts of the state. So this is where you have to make sure you actually have the state being really good partners with the cities and the counties, because a lot of the housing issues comes down to zoning and how cities and counties are using their zoning laws. So it is highly complicated. I will say that we have started to make good progress. And this is one of the silver linings of COVID. I think people really understood that the way we had been housing the chronically homeless was not working. And now, with making sure we're providing them services and places where they feel safe, like locking the door and keeping the belongings safe, is actually resulting in good outcomes. So more on that, but this really is also an issue with a lot of cities that become very affluent. They end up having affordability as a problem.
No question about it. I had a chance to moderate a debate here in San Jose with the mayoral candidates, and that was actually issue number one, was homelessness and public safety. Obviously, all this stuff is intertwined, and Seattle is dealing with this, and so many major cities around the country, and it's obviously a common denominator. And we may see the impact of some of these issues, obviously exacerbated by COVID, where we had so many folks really struggling over the last couple of years with mental health and being separated from families, and just a really terrible dynamic that folks have been dealing with for the last couple of years. Before we let you go, I wanted you to just talk about your community briefly, because I feel as if the Seattle Desi community doesn't get quite enough hype. I mean, I live in Silicon Valley, so I think a lot of folks know how large the community is here, and we're obviously the folks in New York and New Jersey, they represent, and we have folks all over this country. But Seattle has a sneaky large, Indian and overall South Asian population.
It really does. This area has grown so tremendously. So I grew up in California. I actually went to Berkeley as my undergrad. So when I first moved here 26 years ago, it was a culture shock. We simply did not see as many South Asians. We actually didn't even have South Asian grocery stores and enough restaurants. It has completely changed in the last 25 years. It has an extremely vibrant Indian community and a very diverse Indian community. And we're talking all professions, from business owners to the tech industry to teachers to politicians. It really has grown tremendously. I'll say that we don't talk about the Indian population in the Pacific Northwest, but we really should. They elected me, the first Sikh American legislator in the country. We have two other Indian electeds. This was the first time last session in Olympia, or actually in the United States, where we had a Sikh, Hindu, and Muslim senator serving together. Never been done before, but it was done in Washington. We have Satpal Sidhu in the Bellingham area, who's the first Sikh executive of a county. And so we really have robust and very politically engaged Indian community.
Well, I'm so pleased that we had a chance to get a few moments with you. I know it's a little bit earlier on the West Coast, and we're going to have results coming in usually about 8 p.m. Pacific. But certainly, we're really pleased to be on in Washington, Seattle. So tell all the folks up there that we're on Channel 10 in Seattle, Channel 10.4, and you can watch us right there in your living room, and of course stream us as well. So Manka Dhingra, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Best of luck as we will continue to follow your political career.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. And I look forward to being on more and covering more Puget Sound politics.
Thanks a bunch. We really appreciate it. Manka Dhingra from Washington State. All right, so we have gone straight through for almost an hour, and I think we'll take a quick break. And we'll take a break, come back with an update on some of the national races making news. Certainly, we're going to be monitoring the U.S. Senate. The House, we see early on the results are the GOP have taken a few seats back. Obviously, that had a very thin margin. And all of this will impact how things get navigated with Biden and the Democrats controlling the White House, the House, and the Senate. If things flip, the next 2 years will look quite a bit different than these first 2 years of the Biden administration. We'll take a break, have more updates on national races, and have A whole slew of people joining us from around the country as Diya TV election night coverage continues.
An increase in wrinkles and sagging skin? Is your body storing fat more easily? Do you suffer from a lack of energy or the draining side effects of restless sleep? What if I told you it's not your fault? It's just a part of the normal aging process. Hi, I'm Kim Lyons. As a fitness expert, I have always been on the hunt for the next great breakthrough. And that's why I was so excited to learn about the youth hormone associated with reducing body fat, increasing lean muscle mass, and even reducing wrinkles. It's called human growth hormone, or HGH. And as early as your mid-20s, your natural production begins to drop dramatically. The solution? Cerevital. Cerevital is the only amino acid complex shown in a clinical trial to trigger the body's own natural release of HGH from the pituitary gland and increase mean HGH levels by an astonishing 682%.
I would definitely say that Cerevital has turned back the clock for me. Other people, my nieces and nephews, would say things like, "Your skin is glowing," and I'd be like, "Really?"
Cerevital boosts your HGH naturally and at a fraction of the cost of painful synthetic HGH injections.
I am 50 and Cerevital gave me my youth back.
Cerevital sells for $99 in stores, but call right now because we're letting as many women as possible try Cerevital for 30 days absolutely risk-free. Plus, call in the next 6 minutes and we'll also include free shipping. You owe it to yourself to try Cerevital for 30 days. It's absolutely risk-free.
Backed by 4 clinical trials, Cerevital is a true scientific breakthrough, 20 years in the making. Find out why over 4 million boxes of Cerevital have been sold.
Call 800-596-5557 or go to trycerevital.com.
Are you noticing an increase in wrinkles and sagging skin? Is your body storing fat more easily? Do you suffer from a lack of energy or the draining side effects?
From the Indian American and South Asian community involved in politics. So far, we've had, we've been all over the country, from Michigan to Texas to Virginia to Washington State here in the first hour of our broadcast. We're going to continue going for a couple of hours as we get updates from races around the country. Now, the big news of the night, and again, not a huge surprise, but in Florida, Ron DeSantis will continue to be governor in that state. Of course, he's very much a presidential contender in 2024 and beyond. And in the U.S. Senate, Marco Rubio will retain his seat. And so that's what we're looking for, is that change in that balance in power between the Senate and the House. Right now, the Senate at 50-50. So any kind of shift there in one direction or another will change the dichotomy. And certainly, at least the early reports are, the GOP is likely to pick up a bunch of seats, maybe as many as 24. But it's still a little bit too early to call any of that. But they picked up 3 seats earlier tonight, and we'll continue to monitor those results as we get them in. And we're also looking at all the different races at the local level. Tonight, there's a whole bunch of folks that are running in city council races, in assembly seats, as well as the state Senate. So we'll be monitoring all that stuff as the night progresses on tonight. When it comes to this, this political campaign, it's been unusual because for the first time I've noticed that Indian Americans and South Asians broadly are very much at the table. And I think it goes back to all of us getting engaged, whether it's meeting our local folks at the city council and the folks that are our mayors in whatever city we live in. And then, of course, getting involved in statewide politics. And what that's done is it's translated into a real recognition that this is a community on the rise and that we need to make sure that they're represented. I think that the best part of it all was in the last month, we celebrated Diwali in a grand scale that I'd never seen before. And just to give you an example, over the course of like 1 week, we had Diwali parties held by Vice President Harris at her residence. On that same night, former President Trump had a Diwali party at his residence in Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Then President Biden had a White House Diwali party that following Monday. The State Department held the Diwali party as well. And New York City and Washington, D.C. had one. And there were even statewide celebrations. Governor Brian Kemp in Georgia, who also is running for re-election tonight, he had kind of a campaign rally / Diwali party at the same time. And Ron DeSantis, who won very handily tonight, had a Florida version of a Diwali party with a ton of Indian Americans. In fact, I talked to one of the organizers of that event. We're hoping to have him join us when he gets away because he's at the DeSantis victory party tonight. Danny Gaekwad told me that they raised in excess of $100,000 for Hurricane Ian victims, and they handed that check to both Governor and the First Lady of Florida, the DeSantis family. And so they raised that money, and obviously they have ambitions to make sure that their politics are a certain way in Florida. And DeSantis seems to have resonated with a lot of Indian Americans in Florida. And so we're going to have an interesting race to look out moving forward, because DeSantis is a guy that very much has his eyes on Washington. But at the same time, President Trump, as we discovered at Mar-a-Lago roughly a month ago, as well as in Bedminster when I had a chance to speak to him in September, he's very much part of this election 2024 race. And of course, the rumor is that sometime next week, he's expected to announce that he's running for president once again. And so we know President Biden has effectively indicated that he's running again in 2 years. So we could have a Biden-Trump rematch. And we'll see how all this thing shakes out, because now if we have a shift in power between the House and the Senate, what are the next 2 years going to look like? If the GOP controls one house and the Democrats control the other, or even if the GOP controls the entire body of Congress, Biden has that veto. And so in all likelihood, we'll end up with a significant amount of gridlock over the next couple of years. But they did pass some bipartisan legislation this year, which was nice to see. It's been a very challenging period, frankly, for the last couple of years for all of us, just to see what's going on, because they did print a whole bunch of money to deal with the ravages of COVID, and so there wasn't really the transparency that we've normally seen from government. There was just a lot of spending, and really that's kind of changed the calculus. And now we're dealing with higher inflation, unemployment. We're seeing layoffs. So all of these things, after having a white-hot economy for more than a decade, now it's time to pay the piper. And so will the Democrats pay the piper for some of this, or will there be some context? Because obviously both parties have agreed to spend in this manner. Both parties have agreed to continue down this road and frankly leave a lot of folks holding the bag, because the federal deficit is so significant, and it doesn't seem to be even an issue we talk about anymore. But over the next couple of years, we'll see if indeed the GOP has at least one body in Congress. Certainly we're going to see a different way, a different approach than what we've seen over the last couple of years. So that's something we're going to be monitoring. And, we're going to come back here. We'll take another quick break and come back with more guests from around the country as Diya TV Election Night 2022 coverage continues in a moment.
Are you noticing an increase in wrinkles and sagging skin? Is your body storing fat more easily? Do you suffer from a lack of energy or the draining side effects of restless sleep? What if I told you it's not your fault? It's just a part of the normal aging process. Hi, I'm Kim Lyons. As a fitness expert, I have always been on the hunt for the next great breakthrough. And that's why I was so excited to learn about the youth hormone associated with reducing body fat, increasing lean muscle mass, and even reducing wrinkles. It's called human growth hormone, or HGH. And as early as your mid-20s, your natural production begins to drop dramatically. The solution? Cerevital. Cerevital is the only amino acid complex shown in a clinical trial to trigger the body's own natural release of HGH from the pituitary gland and increase mean HGH levels by an astonishing 682%.
I would definitely say that Cerevital has turned back the clock for me. Other people, my nieces and nephews, would say things like, "Your skin is glowing," and I'd be like, "Really?"
Cerevital boosts your HGH naturally and at a fraction of the cost of painful synthetic HGH injections.
I am 50 and Cerevital gave me my youth back.
Cerevital sells for $99 in stores, but call right now because we're letting as many women as possible try Cerevital for 30 days absolutely risk-free. Plus, call in the next 6 minutes and we'll also include free shipping. You owe it to yourself to try Cerevital for 30 days. It's absolutely risk-free.
Backed by 4 clinical trials, Cerevital is a true scientific breakthrough, 20 years in the making. Find out why over 4 million boxes of Cerevital have been sold.
Call 800-596-5557 or go to trycerevital.com.
And we're back here tonight on Diya TV Election Night Central here, coast to coast, live and online, over the air and online. I'm Ravi Kapur. Thank you so much for joining us. We are covering all the races nationally as we get updates. Certainly a lot of the incumbents have won tonight, so we can get into some of that, but I think for the most part, a lot of the incumbents have held serve. But what we're really monitoring is in the House, we're seeing a shift where a few seats have flipped to the GOP. And then, of course, there's a lot of upstart candidates that are trying to get their name out there. And in the Indian American and South Asian community, we're seeing a lot of folks that have run tonight that a lot of people fell short in the primary, but the people that came across here are trying to make a game of it here on election night. And one of the races we've been following is in Florida, and we're going to get into some of the Florida battles tonight because it seems like the GOP have really taken a stronghold and made that state even more red than it was previously. But I want to get someone on here now. Speaking of a Republican in a red state, I want to bring on Niraj Antani, who's the state senator in Ohio here, who's going to give us an update of what's going on there in the Midwest. Niraj, it's always great to see you. Are you there at a campaign party? I know we've had a lot of folks going back and forth from different events. Is that where you're at now?
Senate race, and we're just watching all the races around the country.
I had a chance to interview Governor DeWine years ago before he became governor. Tell me about what you're seeing there in Ohio, since you know firsthand the results. I mean, are you starting to see a complete shift to the right? Obviously, we know Florida was kind of a landslide for DeSantis and for Rubio. Are you seeing something similar there in Ohio and throughout the Midwest?
Yeah, obviously Florida was very strong for us, but it was supposed to be a red tsunami. I don't think we've quite seen it yet. I still think it's going to be a red wave, but maybe not quite a red tsunami. But we're still very hopeful that things will go well up and down the ballot.
Well, tell folks about yourself in case they're unaware of your history, your track record. Obviously, you've been involved in politics at a unbelievably young age. I mean, Niraj, I still believe, is the youngest Indian American elected official, and you've been in office for a number of years now. So tell folks about that in case they don't know your whole trajectory.
Yeah, well, obviously very thankful to you, Ravi, and to Diya TV for everything you do for the Indian American community. But I'm very honored to serve in the state Senate in Ohio and to be the first Indian American and Hindu American state senator in Ohio history, as well as the youngest Indian and Hindu elected official in the country. And it's truly an honor for me to be able to continue to serve. This is actually the first election since 2014 that I'm not on the ballot. It's in the middle of my 4-year term, and so I'm sort of guaranteed to serve for 2 more years. But just very, very honored to be able to serve our community.
So we've had a lot of elected officials who were scheduled to come on tonight, and some of these folks are in the middle of races, right? They are still knocking on doors here on the West Coast. We've had some people saying, "Hey, give us a few minutes. We'll join you after we stop knocking on doors." Is it like that for you in Ohio? Are you still going around trying to touch every potential constituent right up until the deadline? Is that kind of your technique as well?
Well, if I were on the ballot, it would be. Obviously, I'm not on the ballot this time, and so I've been sort of able to take it easy, at least on the political front, and focus on the policy side of the job. But yeah, I mean that's how you want to win a campaign is hitting it until the very very end, until the last vote is in.
So, Niraj, take us through what you've observed in Ohio for those people that aren't watching very closely. Obviously, you have a very important Senate race that folks are looking at, J.D. Vance against Tim Ryan. Give us your thoughts on that race, where things stack up. And what's interesting, I think, for a lot of folks, in case they aren't aware, but J.D. Vance, who's the GOP candidate, is married to an Indian American woman, Usha Vance. Give us your thoughts on that race and where things are going.
Yeah, so in the early returns, JD was down by quite a bit, but now that it's more of the returns are in, he's taken the lead, and I think we feel good that the political climate that is very favorable to Republicans will carry him over to victory.
I mean, certainly that's what we've seen. I think a lot of very tight races. If there's a compelling figure on the left or the right, that could shift some of those races that are very, very contentious, and we might see that in Arizona. Certainly, we saw that in Florida, where we have, and potentially even Pennsylvania, where you have compelling figures that are lifting up other candidates on their ledger. In Ohio, take us through also the dynamic there, because I know it's another kind of sneaky community where there's a very large Indian American populace throughout the state. I've spent some time in Columbus. Spent a bunch of time in Cleveland, thanks to the Cavaliers and the Warriors. Tell folks about Ohio, and your district happens to be basically closer to Dayton, right?
Yeah, my district is Dayton. Actually, does not have a large Indian population. Actually, my district is upwards of 95, 96% Caucasian. But in Ohio, we have a decent amount of Indian Americans, mostly in and around the Cleveland area. And the way that I like to say, in Ohio, is that the Indian American vote isn't necessarily going to be the difference maker, but it can be one piece of a coalition that puts you over the top in a statewide election.
So, Niraj, before we let you go, I mean, any final thoughts about the midterms here? I know you are kind of a political savant. I had a chance to spend some time with you recently, and you really know your stuff. I mean, what are you seeing here in terms of the trend nationally? Certainly, the Democrats won big in 2020. Is this just a natural kind of back and forth between the two parties?
Yeah, well, listen, I think it's undisputed that President Biden is extremely unpopular with not just Republicans but independents, and if the Democrats have any shot of winning in 2024, they likely need to abandon him as a candidate, to turn it around. And so the Republicans are going to do well this year, yes, because I believe in the Republican Party, but frankly, especially as well because of how bad Joe Biden's presidency has been.
And Niraj, finally, I mean, you've been in office now as the state senator. Is there another race that you have your eyes on here in the near future?
I'll be up for election, and I'll be up for re-election in 2024, which will be the priority. But we're looking at a variety of things in the future.
Well, Niraj, it's always great to have you on the program. I really appreciate it. Thanks for swinging through. I know the party is ongoing, so we appreciate the great visuals back there. There from the Mike DeWine celebration as he continues on as governor. Niraj Antani, state senator in Ohio. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, this is the dynamic we're dealing with tonight. Is we have a whole lot of folks willing to come on with us, and they are all over the country, popping in from their respective election night watch parties, their champagne back rooms, and all the rest of it. Because there's a lot of interesting folks that are out there, are heavily entrenched with some of the power players. It was very interesting to see who's going to what tonight, and we're going to have some of these other folks that will be joining us here shortly that are literally hopscotching from one event to the next as they get the word out. And as I was talking about earlier, I think the community has definitely, I think, taken it to another level politically, because when you have a bunch of states celebrating Diwali. You have a bunch of states actually in this past month in October. There was actually a Hindu Heritage Month that was celebrated, and there was actually a whole bunch of declarations from local municipalities, states all over the nation. We've seen a real evolution and respect for the community and a growth. And so I think it's a wonderful sign of things to come. And we had actually a number of Democrats in the first hour. Niraj, as a Republican, has actually a very large voice because he's one of the few people that are elected as a Republican that's Indian American that actually makes his voice felt. And certainly I've seen him interact politically in Ohio. He has a lot of say and a lot of political clout. And this is where we need to engage is we need to have both parties talking to us and making sure that they are addressing our issues. So we certainly hope this particular program is really not just a chance for you to get to know some of the folks on the ground, but really to inspire you to really get more engaged. Because if you're not running for school board, if you're not running for city council or some of these positions in your neighborhood, then you really don't have a chance to speak your mind and influence how things are going in your environment. And certainly I think we've seen a lot of engagement in recent years. The Indian American community has made themselves felt here in Congress, certainly with Kamala Harris getting elected to the Senate. And now, of course, she's in the White House with Ami Bera, Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, and Raja Krishnamurthy in Congress. And we're still waiting, but we hear that we might be minutes away from potentially the announcement of another Indian American to Congress. We're going to keep monitoring that. But, word on the street is Shri Thanedar has a great chance of winning a congressional seat in Michigan. He's a Democrat. And so that potentially would make 5 Democrats in the House. So we're hoping to get the word on his race. And once we do, we'll patch you in live there to Shri's race. And but meanwhile, we'll get some other races going and get some updates. If we have some updates on some of the other races nationally that we're following, certainly, in Illinois, we know that Senator Duckworth was reelected tonight. She's a Democrat, Asian American Democrat. That she was able to hold that seat, and obviously Illinois is a very strong blue state. But we're also monitoring some other statewide races where there's Indian American candidates. And as soon as we get that, because the polls closed about an hour ago, and some of these results are still trickling in, we've been monitoring another race in Florida, as I was mentioning before Niraj came on. Rishi Bagga running for the House seat in Florida. He was trying to become the first Indian American in the Florida legislature, which is kind of hard to believe in the history of that state. There's never been one. But, obviously Ash Kalra was the first Indian American in the California legislature. So these things are still kind of a rare event. We don't have a whole lot of South Asian representation at the state level. And while we have a bunch of folks now in Congress, we do need people to run locally. But we are getting word that Rishi Bagga's attempt to be the 35th district representative in Florida fell a little bit short tonight. We are scheduled to have Rishi come on. We'll see how things go. We're hoping to have to catch up with him in the next hour or so if he's up for it. Obviously it's tough to hear this news when it just happens. But I know he ran a very compelling race. It's a first-time candidate winning a primary without having a huge amount of name recognition. But he's very well liked and known in that Orlando area where he's running, and certainly we've been following his progress for a number of years because he was the former president of the South Asian Bar Association. So Rishi Bagga falls short in Florida tonight, and we'll try to catch up with him a little bit later. But meanwhile, we have a gentleman who knows all about Florida politics, and I'm very pleased to have him on at this juncture. Danny Gaekwad is joining us from Florida. Danny, I really appreciate it because I understand you're coming out of Governor Ron DeSantis's victory party. So first of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know you have your own party to attend as well tonight. Give us a sentiment in Florida, because Florida obviously made a very strong stand. Both DeSantis and Rubio not just held serve, but won convincingly.
So I'm just coming out of the party. You can see I stopped my car and taking your interview. We're very excited. I've been in a politics for 30 years in Florida. I have never seen this much excitement ever. Um, of course, the win was, we knew it, but what was the biggest thing is I talked to you early afternoon. The important is a decisive win by 10 point, 12 point, and 15 point, because we're working very hard to make sure that at the end of the day, we win decisively, because we do not want this flip-flop state. We want to stamp as a red state and get over with it. And we accomplished that. The thing what happened, the candidate was so powerful after a long time that he win with an unbelievable margin. I still know the counting is going on, but I'm sure you are aware of the latest. When I was there with the Ron DeSantis governor himself on the stage, I noticed we were up by million votes. Just to give you idea, previous governor uh, Rick Scott, he he did win two times. It was less than 50,000. And when Ron DeSantis won, it was only 32,000. So you understand, we people who've been helping for a long time, we were worried about it, that how many margin. But the candidate was so powerful. So we decided that if we get 10, 12 points, it will be great. I don't know what is the latest. Do you have any knowledge?
Well, Danny, we're monitoring all the races, and I really appreciate you coming on right after this party. Tell people about Florida. I'm very curious. Obviously, Diya TV is launched in Orlando and Miami and Tampa, and so we really have great interest now in what's going on in Florida. We did not know how strong the Indian community was in Florida until recently. I think that's when we got the word, hey, wait a second, this community is really growing by leaps and bounds, especially in Central Florida, Orlando and Tampa in particular, but even in the coastal communities. We launched recently in Vero Beach and West Palm Beach, as there's a growing community. Take me through what you've seen over the last 30 years and your background and why you got so heavily involved in politics and especially in particular supporting the GOP.
So here is the thing. When I joined the GOP, my idea was very basic. I wanted a small government. No, I wanted a small tax. When I sold my convenience store for 650,000, and they told me I had to pay 28% gain tax, which I was not aware of it. I was young, 27 years old, and I said, "Why the government takes this money?" And they say, "Because da da da." And then I learned from my attorney that Republicans don't like to tax. They want small government. They want to manage. They want to work within the budget and all that. So that's how I joined the party. But unfortunately, when I joined the party, there was nobody winning in the Republican Party ever. Every governor race, city, county, everything was won only by Democrats only. In Ocala, we had even governor. He was a lieutenant governor, but then he became the governor. Buddy McKay, so I was in Ocala only. So all the influence was that. But I stick to my principle that no, I don't want to pay more taxes. I want small government. But it took us so long. But last 15, 20 years, now we are in a shape, or we are in a, I can say, we are in a position where we can win by 12, 10, 12 points. Imagine in a house, that time was 25 only member out of 120 were Republican and remaining was Democrat. Imagine. They had a super majority. They wrote all the laws for hundreds of years. And now we have a chance and we are trying to make a history. So history is very simple. Governance, we did not believe in a woke corporation. Governor stood by against the Disney when it time comes, because they didn't want the doctrine from the this woke corporation. In the COVID, I have a lot of hotels and other businesses. Imagine if they would have shut down just like in New York and California, I would have gone bankrupt, because you have hundreds of $1 million worth of asset, and a governor wake up one morning and say everything shut down, go home, don't worry. It doesn't work. So that's why this governor is so popular. He did not take the wind and say which way wind is blowing. Oh, everybody's shutting. He called us. He talked to us, different community, different leader, and we all say, sir, we can survive. And he took his career decision for us, business people, people of Florida, anybody. And you saw the results. We thrive, and we are thriving more than 2019, in 21, and now 22. I was also the Visit Florida, which is a tourism body. I was a chairman of state of Florida, and that's where we brought more tourists than 2019 record year. We brought 136 million tourists. This is all about the leadership, the cabinet, the leadership, the legislators, the state senate. It's a new wave, and I hope America rides on that wave and we become a great again.
So Danny, tell folks about your personal involvement with Ron DeSantis. Obviously, President Trump is likely to make an announcement next week that he's running again, but DeSantis seems to be obviously the hot item that I hear rumors from time to time that he is right there, lock and step to potentially run for president in 2024. Give us your insight on DeSantis. Is he the guy for the GOP moving forward, or would you continue to support President Trump if he makes another run of it in 2024?
I have a simple thing in my life, very, very basic. Donald Trump, I voted for him. I had voted for him again in 20. I love him, like him. But right now, he has a more cause to create a stir, where DeSantis is a steady. He doesn't create a controversy. He doesn't do, crazy things. Of course, I love Trump, but equally, I would like to see the stability rather than a fights. Because right now he's fighting a war. I would like to see they both work together rather than against each other. Because now we have a chance to take a house back. We took it, I think, tonight. I have not seen the result because I just came from the party. And we are also taking the Senate back. Now only remaining is the presidency. Between Ron DeSantis and the Donald Trump, if they figure it out. By the way, I had a privilege to sit on the same table with at that time, President Donald Trump and Governor Ron DeSantis on the same table, with only 3 more people with me. So media can create a fight, but I think they both are very intelligent and they'll figure it out. If you say today, I'm saying, if the Donald Trump runs Florida, he will not win that easy. He may get defeat. Only God knows what will happen. But I remember with the one tweet and one endorsement of Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis won. But he's not saying one word. He was at my house for dinner. I was at his house for Diwali dinner. I met his wife on this couple of days back on Sunday. We had a lunch. They never said one word about Donald Trump or the governor the president. They just very, very focused on a governorship. I never seen them once they using it. It's just a speculation. And I always like to wait and watch rather than start predicting. Because politics makes us strange bedfellows, as we all know. So only time will tell us where the Trump and DeSantis can do. Trump is very popular in a country, but he has a lot of things going on, and a lot of people are after him, where Ron DeSantis is a clean slate right now, as on today. So that's my opinion, that how Indian American are looking into it. I am the leader of Indian American because I'm a grassroots worker, and I take people and do the large fundraising, also large events, rallies, and I understand. But our people are not highly educated about politics. They're very intellectual community, very smart, very great, but I don't think we have much political education. I did political science as a major subject in a college, but I don't think everybody has a privilege to do so.
Danny, finally, before we let you go, and I really appreciate you pulling yourself out of that party.
Sorry,
and I understand you have your own party
yes,
with your family and friends and other elected officials and aspiring officials, which next time we'll have to get a camera at your house for for the election night festivities, maybe for 2024. Tell me about your role in getting the volley kicked off in the governor's mansion in Florida, because obviously we were talking about it earlier on the broadcast. This year we had Diwali at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump. There was a White House Diwali. There was a vice presidential Diwali featuring Vice President Harris. We had a Diwali celebration in New York City. We had one in Washington, D.C. The State Department, I happened to attend that one and also attended the one at Mar-a-Lago as well. It's amazing that the volley is being embraced, that this community is being embraced by both parties. But I know you had a big role in getting things kick-started in Florida and beyond.
So what happened in 2004, I was doing campaigning for the George W. Bush, and we were having a large fundraising. We were paying $20,000 per person. And one gentleman, elderly gentleman, came and asked me, what agenda do you have? You have a lot of friends here, Indian. I said, I really don't have any agenda with the president, and really one should not have any. So he says, do you know why president don't celebrate Diwali in a White House? I said, I don't know, but I can ask him. I said, he's just human like you and me. So I lined up my 4 or 5 friends, which was, one of them was Hemant Patel. At that time, he was AHOA Board of Directors, and now then he became the chairman of AHOA, Asian American Hotel Owners. So I said, can you guys line up with me? And we asked President same question. I said, President, why you don't do Diwali in the White House? He didn't understood even word Diwali, and he didn't care. And I moved on the next. And when the 4th guy came, he said, guys, stop. We're going to do Diwali in a White House. And he said, please talk to this gentleman and he'll make it happen. And that is the start of Diwali in 2004 and 5 in a White House. One thing I learned being a community member, whether you are Democrat or Republican, unless you ask, you get nothing. So if you start Diwali in a White House, whether it's a President Obama or President Trump, they all have to do it, because it's very difficult, because they celebrate every other things, from Kawanza to everything. So I said, why not our world largest Hindu festival? And 2 billion people celebrate in 23 countries. And then you educate your leader, and he was kind enough to start. I did exactly same. When Ron DeSantis was candidate, he came to my house for dinner. We sat and we asked him Diwali, but he knew about Diwali being a congressman. And he says, yes, Danny, it's a great idea. And then to my shock and awe, he just decided, him and his wife, that he will do Diwali in his house, in his governor mansion. Just to give you an idea, this year 7 different governors have started Diwali. My idea was very simple. You don't ask for yourself, you ask for community, you look a lot better and you get things done. So this is how the Diwali started. And he even mentioned when he was in Ocala rally that we do this, we do that, we're gonna do Diwali again. And this year he told me, go ahead and invite 300 people. That's a lot of people in a governor mansion, but he was not afraid at all. And this is what we need to do. We need to start taking pictures and lying about how relationship you have. The only time I truly believe that a political leader, you have leadership, if you have his cell phone or his wife's cell phone, not his secretary's cell phone, not his office cell phone. He's not your friend. And this is what we Indian community can do. If we give money, if we give them volunteerism, we need to ask polite but hard questions. And that's what I did this time. On wemustmeet.com, you can look up. I asked him 12-minute questions and answer only about Indian American, not about Asian American. I'm not Asian. I'm Indian first. And in Asia is too big to lump me with the Chinese, Japanese, Taiwanese, Thai. I don't look like that. I'm Indian American. If you look at it, the Jews people in America, they did very well. How did they very well? Does anybody dare to call them a Middle Eastern? Israel? Israel is in the smack middle of the Middle East. But we never compare them with the Middle East. We always say, oh, Israelis. We don't call them Middle East. We call 27 other countries in the Middle East. Same way, nobody can dare, even a president of the United States, to call them Middle Eastern. Then why you call me South Asian, Asian American? I'm Indian American, one of the largest democracies, and good 5 million in USA. And the proof is in a pudding. Your channel is now moving in Florida and other states, which is a great welcome news. Thank you for Diya TV, those who are coming and covering us. My thing is that stop doing chaplusi. Start asking right question. Chaplusi doesn't go a long way. You stay chaplus, but you need to ask real questions.
Well, Danny, I really appreciate you taking a few moments after breaking away from the DeSantis victory party to give us your perspective. I know you've had a really outsized influence in Florida, but certainly I know there's a lot of folks that are following your footsteps,
Yes.
Fundraising and getting engaged in the community. So I really appreciate you giving some of that context because let's face it, it takes folks like you to make the asks to get these elected officials to actually do things for our community and not just take a check and take a photo, but to actually get involved in the interests that this community have. So thank you, Danny. Please get to your party. And we really appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
We have great party going in Ocala. My two sons had organized. My older son, you may not know, but he was in the U.S. Army as a lieutenant. And now he's organized party today. We have a great watch party because we're going to win big. And thank you very much giving me time and energy to talk to you. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Danny Gaekwad, live from Florida. He was at the DeSantis party in Tampa, and he's got his own big events going on in Central Florida as well. Now we're going to be joined by another gentleman in the throes of elections of election night, and that is none other than Ash Kalra, who has quite a story of his own to talk about here in our great state of California. Ash, it's always great to see you. I love the San Jose representation. Ash, a very proud native of San Jose. And of course, for those of you that don't know Ash, I don't know what you've been doing all this time because Ash was the first Indian American ever elected to the California legislature, holding court right now here on election. I really appreciate it. I know I was talking to the team and they're saying, well, Ash wants to come on a little bit later because you're still knocking on doors. Is that the case? Take us through your particular election night. And also, I know you well, but introduce yourself to our national audience who may not know much about you.
Well, my name is Ash Kalra. I'm here with my father, Satya Kalra. And a lot of folks know him from Instagram and Facebook fame, as we spend a lot of time eating together. And that's actually what I'm doing right now. We just finished having dinner, but not too long ago, I was knocking on doors. As it got dark, it was rainy and cold out here, but that's the kind of work that is necessary to win elections. And over here in San Jose, knocking on doors for my friend Cindy Chavez, who's running for mayor of San Jose. I'm in finishing up my 6th year in the state assembly, running for re-election, so I'm also on the ballot today, hoping to get a 4th term. And prior to that, was on the city council in San Jose for 8 years. So I've been in elected office for 14 years, grown up here in San Jose, and it's quite an honor to represent the community in which I grew up.
Tell me about this year's election. A little different calculus. Obviously, we're in a very blue state, California. I actually filled out my ballot today, and I looked across the board, and all very familiar faces from the governor, Gavin Newsom, who a year ago was facing a recall, and this year didn't seem like he ran many ads because it seemed like it's basically a slam dunk. Malia Cohen, Fiona Ma, these are all folks that if you're involved in politics at any level here in California, these are familiar names to you. What have you learned knocking on doors for Cindy Chavez? We actually moderated a debate with Cindy Chavez and Matt Mahan. And I think the issues, we had 4 or 5 topics. We only had around an hour, but these topics seem to be kind of national in nature: homelessness, public safety, housing. These are all common denominator issues that people are talking about. Is that what you're seeing on the ground as someone obviously on the ballot tonight as well? What is moving the needle for folks to vote for candidates?
I think particularly in local elections, people want to know that you have a record of accomplishing things, of leading, because these are big issues that we're dealing with at the state level, at the local level: homelessness, the housing costs where we are in San Jose, some of the most expensive housing in the nation, but also issues like public safety is definitely front of mind for a lot of folks, and issues like climate change, the environment, some of those global issues. In California, you also find that our electorate is very knowledgeable about it and wants to know, even to the local level, what folks are going to do about it as well.
Ash, been in the trenches for a long time. You're a veteran at this. Does it get any easier to put your name out there? I mean, how have things changed now that you're a real veteran of electoral politics versus when you first got started?
Well, it's always quite a big deal when you have your name on the ballot, and there's no doubt I've learned a lot. If you think about it now, I mean, this is my third time, actually fourth time on the ballot for the assembly, twice in the city council. So if you include primary races, I've been on the ballot 12 times, including today. And you definitely learn a lot. When it's an open seat, it's definitely more contentious. I'm fortunate I live in an area that once I was able to win my seat in 2016, I mean, they spent over $6 million against me, and a lot of folks had counted me out. But we have the community with us. And that's where it really matters to have that grassroots support. Oftentimes people have more money and think that they know the governor, they know the mayor, they know these high ranking officials, they get their support. But that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's the constituents, it's your neighbors, it's the folks in the neighborhood that really don't even know who we are for the most part, that you have to reach out to and introduce yourself to, and give some sense that you have a handle of the issues they're going through every single day.
Well, if there's one thing I've learned about your efforts in the past is that you really are grassroots. I've seen you physically going out there into the neighborhoods and knocking on doors. You're not doing big budget ad campaigns and spamming everybody. And I can't tell you how many different ads I got from certain football teams trying to influence the election here in Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
which, but, that big money is everywhere. And certainly I think it is. It's great to see that you can actually still win an election by knocking on doors and meeting people in your community and getting out there. Before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about being, because of your unique position, being really the only Indian American in the legislature. You get all the topics like thrown at you, right? Any kind of contentious issue, any happy story. So, you might have to write proclamations for everybody. You have all this different stuff that gets thrown at you. How do you navigate that? Because, obviously we have a really diverse community, even just amongst Indian Americans and South Asians. Everything gets thrown at your door. And then let's face it, you may not be on the side of some of these folks. So how do you navigate that, knowing that things are increasingly polarized?
It's challenging. I mean, to start with the good stuff, it is quite an honor to be able to do resolutions for Hindu American awareness, Sikh American awareness, for Vaisakhi, for Diwali, Indian independence. To be the voice of such a vibrant community is an honor, and that's the fun stuff. But there's no doubt that a lot of things get brought to my table, and much of which really doesn't have a whole lot to do with my representation of the people of California and the people in my district. And so it is challenging to navigate at times, and to let folks know, look, I understand that there's some passionate feelings, for example, about things that might be happening in India and what have you. I grew up here. I'm very proud of being Indian American, but I'm a Californian and I'm elected to the state assembly. I certainly take the time to represent our Indian American community here the best I can when there are issues regarding discrimination, whether it's against the Sikh community or Hindus or Muslims and or members of the South Asian community. I take that seriously as the only representative in the legislature that can understand what it means to be a religious minority from South Asia, or to be misunderstood, having grown up here and being bullied growing up. I get all that. And so it is challenging at times to walk that line and to focus on the things that you believe matter in terms of the everyday quality of life of your constituents, and to speak up when it does matter in terms of unique situations that that I'm all too well familiar with, just being raised here.
Well, Ash, before we let you go, I know the polls close here in California at 8 p.m. Pacific. Do you want to declare victory now, or you want to wait a few minutes?
No, never.
How to put you on the spot.
I think my dad voted for me, so I know I have. I have 2 votes here, so that's a good start.
Well, whenever your career ends politically, I know you have a cooking show in your future, so we'd love to pick that up and air that on Diya for sure.
That sounds good. Thank you so
Always a
much.
pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much, and best of luck tonight. I'm sure. I have no doubt that you're probably on your way to another victory. So thanks a lot for joining us again tonight.
Thank you.
All right, now joining us is Karthick Ramakrishnan from AAPI Data. Always love to get his perspective on the numbers. This man crunches numbers like nobody else, and appreciate you standing by as things start to get we start to get more information about how this election has gone. Tell me about what you've been focused on here in 2022. Obviously, it's a midterm election, a little bit different dynamic than, say, a federal presidential election. What are you seeing on the ground?
Well, what's interesting, thank you for having me, by the way, and it's fascinating and nail biting, I think, for a lot of people. Typically speaking, the president's party after the first term loses a bunch of seats in the midterm election. Add on top of that the kind of record high inflation that we're having, you would think that it's going to be a massive red wave election. The Senate, as predicted, looks like it's going to come down to a couple of seats. In terms of the Indian American vote, the kind of places it's where the action, I think, heading into election day, where people were paying attention to, were places like Pennsylvania and Georgia, to some extent North Carolina, but looking at the results coming in, it looks like that's not a close election after all. But those are the places where the Senate races are quite competitive, and you have a significant Indian American population. In many of the House races, there are other Asian Americans that are more populous in some of the House races, say in Orange County. You don't have that many of the competitive House districts where you have a sizable Indian population. But that could change in future years, right? I mean, Indian Americans are part of the diversification of Texas, for example. Although I should say that I've been studying American politics and elections since 2000, and people have been swearing since 2000 that Texas turning blue is right around the corner. It's been 22 years. We haven't seen that yet. And I'm not sure that we're going to see that for the foreseeable future, because, of course, there are other groups that are fast growing as well, including the Latino population in states like Texas, where the GOP has made some pretty significant inroads over the last few years.
So, Karthik, obviously you have a focus on Asian American political data, but is this overall race, is this the kind of red tsunami that folks were kind of predicting, or is it just kind of a mild movement towards the GOP? Where do you think this is all going to end up?
Well, you had if you didn't have abortion as a major issue, and on top of that, if partisanship weren't such a strong factor, Democrats should have lost a lot more seats. The only caveat I'll give to that is what you also saw was a prior game of redistricting, if you will, where states where you had single party control and where the party had a chance to draw the districts, like in the state of Florida, for example, or in states like Georgia, there, a lot of these House races are not as competitive as they might be if you had a citizens redistricting commission, for example. You have a few states, including California, where you have that, where communities could actually have a shot at making a difference. But no, like we're not seeing a red tsunami or even a very large red wave. But you are seeing those pretty significant reaction against the inflation and the kind of economic costs that people are bearing. One of the things that I'll be paying attention to in the weeks and months that follow is to look at turnout, and especially turnout among younger voters. It'll be interesting to see what turnout among Asian American voters looks like. Indian Americans in general, by the way, have among the highest levels of turnout of any Asian group. They also tend to be among the strongest on the Democratic side. And that's what our polling and others polling before the election indicated. And I would expect, to the extent that we have any kind of reliable survey data, that probably held true. But Indian Americans aren't big enough in many of these swing states or swing districts to have made a huge difference, but probably are making elections more competitive, either on the Democratic side or the Republican side, because of that higher turnout and more likely to be a Democratic voting bloc.
So forecast before we let you go here, 2024. Obviously, we're expecting President Trump to make an announcement shortly that he's going to be running. President Biden already has kind of hinted that he's running again. Are we going to see what we saw in 2020? Do you think the whole thing has changed because of Roe v. Wade, because of inflation, because of what we might be in, frankly, a recession now? We have this white hot economy, and now reality setting in where your purchasing power isn't what it was a short time ago.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing from this election is very likely a rematch of 2020, right? The reason why I'm saying that is imagine if we had a very big Republican tsunami in this election. Chances are that we would have had calls for Biden to step aside and for someone like, Pritzker from Illinois or Gavin Newsom or someone else to take over. But this is not a huge loss. Kind of expect the president's party to lose seats. It doesn't look like it's a massive loss of seats. On the Republican side, the interesting action will be DeSantis and Trump, and we're already seeing some early signs of that conflict. It's a low grade political competition and conflict right now. It'll spill out into the open if DeSantis does indeed want to take on Trump. Trump is not going to give that up that easily. Not sure that DeSantis is going to give up that easily either. He seems like a pretty ambitious candidate as well.
Well, you just probably heard it right before you came on. Danny Gaekwad, who's a huge DeSantis supporter, very big in Florida politics. He's kind of hinting at DeSantis being the guy moving forward. And certainly I know GOP circles tell me it's Trump all the way. And then a lot of folks think that DeSantis and maybe another Indian American figure, Nikki Haley, could be a future ticket. So we'll certainly stay tuned to that in 2024. It gives us a lot of fodder to talk about over the next couple of years. Karthik, always great to see you. Really appreciate the time tonight. Enjoy numbers crunching. I'm so glad you do this more than the rest of it. You do it better than anyone. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Karthick Ramakrishnan from AAPI Data. And now we're joined by Rishi Bhutada, who is involved with HAPAC, the Hindu American Political Action Committee. We're trying to get perspectives from around the country. Rishi's based in Texas, and I know a couple of years ago we had your colleague Mahir Magani on to talk about the PAC, but it's really evolved in recent years. So first of all, Rishi, thanks for being with us. Tell folks about some of your efforts here in 2022. I mean, obviously it's a midterm. Some of the spending is not quite as what it is during a general kind of federal presidential election, but were you guys very engaged and active here in 2022?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. We were active in congressional races, and we started doing more state level and local level endorsements this year around the country. So that's something that we put together. That's something new that we've done as compared to previous cycles. So we were more engaged in local and state races, and we also were engaged in federal races, trying to get the Hindu American viewpoint out to candidates, and we provided a detailed agenda to them and had candidates answer a questionnaire or do an interview with us, so that way we could engage them on the issues that are important to the Hindu American community.
So Rishi, tell me about what candidates want to hear from you, and specifically, Hindu Americans in particular. I think I'm so glad we had you on because Hindu Americans really didn't have a voice at any kind of table. Really, I think when we started this network 13 years ago, Indian Americans weren't at the table, South Asians weren't at the table, but Hindu Americans, even kind of smaller subset of this larger group, did not have anyone representing their interests. But we've seen a shift in the last, half dozen years. Certainly, we've seen the rise of President Trump leveraging the Indian American community that he was familiar with between New York and New Jersey. Shalli Kumar from the Republican Hindu Coalition, who's also scheduled to join us later on tonight. He's put out Hindu issues first. And I know you guys are nonpartisan, but certainly tell me about that dynamic. Are both Democrats and Republicans completely in sync with what the Hindu agenda is.
So it's I mean, if you went and asked many Democratic or Republican officials just off, without any prior context or anything, I'm sure they would have very little understanding of what the Hindu agenda is. It's more it's getting in the room with them, educating them, giving them an understanding, giving them context, and that's one of the main things that we do with our outreach when we're talking to candidates around the country is that we're not just saying, okay, what do you think about this? Because if they unless they have any prior knowledge, they really don't know what to think of it. So we give them a fact based explanation of various issues. For example, such as Hindu phobia or hate crimes or bullying and how they affect the Hindu community. And so once they understand that, then they understand the kind of the issues the Hindu community is facing, and then we're able to build that bridge to allow them to understand what the Hindu community cares about, and then they're on board with kind of legislation and statements that emphasize Hindu American community issues.
Well, we've certainly seen a spate of hate crimes against Asian Americans at large, but no question, Indian Americans, South Asians broadly, but specifically Hindu Americans have been targeted in recent months, and it's been unbelievable to document. Frankly, the kind of hate. I think you're based in Texas, if I'm not mistaken, and we saw the rants involving that one lady with kind of targeting 4 Indian women there, and we saw the Taco Bell kind of racist rants in Fremont. I mean, it's been really stunning
Yeah,
to
no,
witness this kind of hate.
absolutely. It was stunning, and we were doing a lot of outreach around that point in time, and one of the things that we've been you see. I think we've gotten a better appreciation, especially you've seen statements coming out from Democratic Party officials and Republican Party officials, kind of condemning these things, and I think that's been very helpful in getting these issues there. We don't hate crimes aren't are a thing that no one wants to see happen, but that type of engagement is necessary when they do happen. So we're happy to see officials doing that, and so now we're hoping that the candidates that we support are going to win, and we're watching that closely. So.
Before we let you go, I wanted to ask about the PAC's efforts to reach out to both sides of the aisle. How do you guys balance that? I mean, what's the strategy? Are you seeing the GOP? I certainly, in recent years, I've had many GOP officials reach out to me and say, "Hey, I want to talk to your community." I mean, I had Dr. Oz reach out to us a few weeks ago and talk to him about. Obviously, he's got a very tight race in Pennsylvania, and Brigadier General Don Bolduc in New Hampshire. I never thought that a New Hampshire Senate candidate would have interest in talking to us to reach our community. But are you seeing this from the GOP and the Democrats? I mean, take us through what it's like to talk to these people behind closed doors.
So I would say yes, we are absolutely seeing outreach from both sides of the aisle. I was on the phone one day interviewing a Republican House candidate from Nevada, and I was talking to him about the issues and everything, and he had a perspective, and he framing it in that context for him, because he had an understanding. He was a Jewish candidate, and so he had an understanding of various things as they affected the Jewish community. So getting him to understand how the similar things with the Hindu community we're able to build that bridge. And similarly with Democratic candidates, I talked to Democratic candidates in a number of places, and they had I would say they wanted to know more about the Hindu community and understand. They had heard a little about Hindu phobia, or they had heard about some hate crime somewhere. Certainly, the destruction of the Gandhi statue and at the temple in New York City caught a lot of attention, and that so those types of events got them to say, okay, what matters to your community, and so therefore those were the things that really helped us get across what type of what issues matter. So.
Well, Rishi, we really appreciate your insight tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. I always like to hear what some of the political insiders are doing. I mean, there's fundraisers, there's folks running all these PACs around the nation, and it's fun to see how the community continues to evolve and this dynamic continues to change and shift. So thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, terrific. And now we're going to bounce to another gentleman very much in the trenches of political fundraising and really seeing how our community is being reflected at the highest levels. And that's Ajay Jain Bhutoria, who's joining us now. Ajay, it's always great to see you. It's nice to see you away from a Diwali party. I feel like you have gone to every Diwali party around the nation. Tell folks about what you've been doing the last step before we get serious here. I mean, you've been everywhere.
Yeah, great to see you, Ravi, and it was wonderful to see you at the state Diwali party. I mean, the Biden administration has hosted, I think, one of the largest Diwali party ever in the White House, with over 400 people joining at the White House Diwali party. And there was an amazing Diwali party hosted by Vice President Kamala Harris at her house, where the Bollywood music like Desi Girl was playing at her, at her house. And we did play the sparklers, light the sparklers, Desi food, and it was another great Diwali party hosted by Secretary Blinken with the State Department, and so it was great. I mean, this shows that how much the Biden-Harris administration respects and loves the South Asian community, and how in this election, the South Asian community and the Asian American community is playing the role of the margin of the victory again in all the battleground states where is still there's a lot. The night is young, and there's most of the results have not been yet counted and declared.
I mean, it's still very early as the polls are closing here on the West Coast. It's about to be 8 p.m. here Pacific, so polls are closing on the West Coast. And take us through your role now. You're heavily involved with the Democratic Party, including Asian American issues. So take us through what you've been doing with the Biden administration. And specifically, I know you go out of your way to make sure Indian American and Hindu American issues are addressed by the Democratic Party. So walk us through that, Ajay.
Sure. I mean, with little pride, I can say that I'm only the first Indian man as a deputy national finance chair for the Democratic Party ever. And in that role, my role is there are only few deputy national finance chair for the DNC to raise the resources the Democratic Party and the funds the Democratic Party needs to fund our candidate. And this time, I mean, our chairman, Jamie Harrison, has done an incredible job, in raising the amount of the money we need to support the grassroots and build the grassroots organization. We started building the grassroots organization 1 year ahead of this midterm election, and that results are showing and will be showing us throughout the night. And also wanted to make sure that our South Asian voices are heard in the Democratic Party, and as well as in the the issues which are important. So if you remember, in 15th August 2020, we had a event with then presidential candidate President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris and all the others, and where we brought up the fact sheet from the issues which are important to our community, whether it's the immigration, green card backlog issue, or issues related to hate crimes in our temples and for against our Indian South Asian community, and it is good that now with I being on the as an advisor to President Biden on the Asian American Pacific Islander Commission, have been able to raise those issues and been able to submit the recommendation in the commission, which has been presented to the President Biden. I'll give you just few of them. In the May commission meeting, recommendation was submitted to USCIS to reduce the cycle time for green card processing up to 6 months to end-to-end cycle, and that recommendation is now pending with the President Biden's desk. Similarly, in September commission meeting, we submitted a recommendation for H-1B visa stamping to be done in US, so that a lot of our community, which were an H-1, faces huge issues, and they cannot even go to India even if their parents are on a critical stage in ICU, etc., because there's a appointment issue, visa appointment issue, etc. So a lot of these issues are now in the front of the administration to be addressed, and the voice has been, the recommendation has been submitted, and hopefully there will be a huge of change and good things coming for the community.
Before we let you go, I mean, what do you think will get accomplished in this kind of lame duck session? And if indeed the GOP takes back the House, which at least the early numbers say that, we don't know definitively yet, will we actually be able to get something done, or are we just going to be in a standstill for 2 years? Do you have a sense of, especially these issues that are affecting our community? The green card backlog is ridiculous. And I know I personally asked President Trump about supporting that. He said he would. And obviously, we've talked to many Democrats who support this. So what do we got to do to get this over the finish line to help all these folks that are struggling to get their paperwork in order?
So just to take a 1 minute recap of what President Biden has already accomplished so far: signed the Inflation Reduction Act, signed the Chips and Science Act, took the historic action to address the gun violence epidemic, restored American leadership on the world stage, and build a strong relationship with India on many fronts, with the Quad and on the economic forum and joint partnership with there's a Katsa waiver act presented by Congressman Ro Khanna in the so as the arms supply can be increased to India, and then the biggest job growth in American history has been done by President Biden, and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, combating the climate crisis, reducing emissions, and so on. I mean, there's a great things which President Biden has been doing, and is supportive of the green card backlog issue. There's two processes. One is through the commission, which is on the administrative side, the steps which USCIS can take, which are non-legislative, which is the recommendation which has been submitted by the commission. And then there are legislative sides like Eagle Act, which is pending by the Congress. So hopefully, I mean, with the new House coming in, there is also a Republican side of congressmen who will be supporting it. So hopefully we can see some action on that. But I think the best days of America are ahead. I mean, we will have a struggle in the Congress to put the agenda for both sides to work towards the betterment of the future of the country. But we are hopeful that Democrats will retain the majority in the Senate, and President Biden will continue to work for the people of America.
Ajay, Jain, Bhutoria, thank you so much for all your insights. Always love to hear all the inside baseball there from the White House. I know you were there. I don't know how often you had to fly back and forth between the vice presidential Diwali event, and I know you were there, and I happened to be at Mar-a-Lago that night for President Trump's event, and then we really appreciate you sharing footage with us, because we couldn't be in two places at once. And then, of course, the White House event, the State Department event. You've been everywhere. And it just shows how much of our community is starting to get represented at the highest levels, and at the state level as well. So it's great to see, and I know you're one of the people that make this happen.
Thank you, Ravi. And there are more than 130 people who have been appointed, of the Indo-Americans who have been appointed at various levels, including Neera Tanden at one of the highest level. And so great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajay, Jain, Bhutoria. And no question, we had a chance to talk to Neera Tanden recently, who is the White House staff secretary and senior advisor to President Biden. And there was like more than 200
Yes.
Indian Americans in the administration, which is just mind-blowing, frankly, considering how few there were just a few decades ago. So great to see you, and glad to see that our community is starting to engage at every level of governments. And speaking of a guy now who is engaging in government, we have a gentleman coming to us live from Florida after a very contentious battle in election 22, but it's none other than our friend Rishi Bagga, who we certainly have been following his progress over this past year. And of course, he's based in Orlando. Rishi, the former president of the South Asian Bar Association, he might be familiar to those of us that really follow Saba intently. But in addition to that, he's an entrepreneur and ran for a seat in the Florida legislature tonight, and could have made history tonight, in fact, as being the first Indian American or South Asian in that legislature. Give us the latest update, Rishi, because I know we got some numbers in the last hour, but I want to hear from you straight. First of all, thanks for being here tonight on election night itself.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm so thankful for you all for hosting this. It's so incredibly important for our community to be engaged in elections, and I'm so glad that you all make that a priority because it's incredibly important. So, look, at this point, we are anticipating that unfortunately we have not been able to prevail, and it looks like we've been sort of the victim of a red wave that's gone through our state. Of course, our governor at the moment is Governor Ron DeSantis, and he was looks like he was reelected tonight, and so that was probably a big part of why a lot of us who were running for legislative seats weren't able to get too much further. So certainly a loss for our campaign, which is tough for us, but more importantly, I think I think from a bigger picture, I should say, it definitely does show maybe the direction that the state's going in. I'm a proud Democrat and was proud to run as a Democrat, but it looks like for those of us who ran as Democrats in the state, especially here in the Central Florida area, which usually, especially here in Orlando, our seats in Orlando and around the Orlando area do lean Democratic. A lot of folks did not prevail in seats that they thought they'd be able to win. So we are in a situation where it looks like there will be a Republican supermajority in both houses of the legislature, along with Governor DeSantis.
It does look like there was not a red tsunami, as I think Niraj Antani was talking about earlier on this broadcast, but certainly the momentum. DeSantis clearly was an enormous victor tonight, and Rubio certainly benefited from that. And I would imagine just the down ballot effect of having a strong candidate like that. And we're seeing that also potentially in Pennsylvania. I think the real politically astute among us looked at that Dr. Oz Fetterman race up there and thought, well, wait a second, Fetterman has a good shot because the governor's race is also up in Pennsylvania, and Josh Shapiro is a very strong Democratic candidate, and that might influence that Oz Fetterman race. And so far, we're getting some data we're going to provide to everybody a little bit later in the broadcast, but it looks like right now Fetterman is up on Dr. Oz, a very important seat, certainly for control of the U.S. Senate. But, getting back to your race, which I've always found really interesting because you didn't have to do this. You've got a very successful career. You're an attorney, and parents built a great business in Orlando. I've had a chance to come out there. We have a station in Orlando, so I've really loved that the community is just developing throughout Central Florida. What did you learn from going through this process? I know it's hard to put yourself out there. We had another young lady on earlier, Victoria Virasingh, who fell short in the primary. So it's not easy to get to even this stage. But what did you learn throughout this whole process, and what do you want to take away from this?
Yeah, look, I mean, it was such an incredibly, important learning opportunity for me. And I'll say this, I'm really thrilled to even be in this situation. Like you alluded to, it's tough, especially as an Indian American. And for me, I'm a first-time candidate to get to the point where you can even get past a primary. We had an incredibly competitive primary here on this side. This seat, and again, the red wave aside, the seat actually leans Democratic. And so we were in a place where a lot of the seats that leaned that way had very competitive primaries. So we had a three-way primary that was incredibly competitive. We had two other individuals who were running in that primary who had run in the past. And so I was running up against kind of, some veteran figures as a newbie. And we worked really, really hard to win that primary. And we were thankful to have won it. We won it actually just by 57 votes. And there have been other South Asians that have run in Florida in the primary levels, and none had won before. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're the first to have actually won a primary as a South Asian in our state. So I'm very proud of that, because that still showed I think, a big development for our community, and it shows the increasing impact that we have here in Florida. The South Asian community, the Indian American community is rapidly growing in this state. Our district here that I was running from is 8% Asian American, and so we'll see what the numbers end up looking like as to how many ended up turning out. But certainly, these districts in Central Florida that have growing numbers of Asian Americans, of South Asians, of Indian Americans, we will have a bigger and bigger impact on our elections here. So, I learned a ton from it. Being a first-time candidate, it is difficult to put yourself out there, and you make yourself quite vulnerable to attacks. It's one thing. I've been an attorney. I've been practicing for 16 years. So, I get attacked in the courtroom, but it's a very different situation when you're attacked on TV. And when, we had to work really hard to raise about $90,000 in this race to run. And it looks like my opponent, we're estimating, ran about, had money coming in from outside from the party, from DeSantis, that was probably around $2 to $3 million, and they attacked us pretty hard the entire time that we were running. So again, $3 million budget versus a less than $100,000 budget is a disparity, and so it certainly shows the impact that money can have, but also the factors that are up ballot, right? I mean, when you're running for the legislature, you're necessarily you have to look at the folks who are up ballot and what excitement they're bringing to the table. I mean, it's pretty clear at this point that we didn't have that excitement, but the folks who were supporting Ron DeSantis and the folks who are Republicans did have that excitement, and that's borne out by how much money he was able to bring in. I think I don't recall the final numbers that Charlie Crist, who was the the Democratic candidate, brought in, but on the Republican side, Ron DeSantis raised about $220 million, which is a gigantic sum of money, and I think they still have about $80,000 or $90,000 in the bank, so they didn't even have to spend all that money. And part of that came from folks in the state, but a lot of it came from folks outside the state who are just excited about Ron DeSantis. And so, all those factors I think played in. And for those of us who are running down ballot, I think they all impacted us. But certainly, we're proud of the race we ran, but it's certainly an educational experience as well.
I can imagine it. It's not fun, and I give a lot of folks credit for putting yourself out there because it's your name, your likeness. They're making personal attacks. I can't even begin to explain some of the flyers I've received in my own mailbox, bashing people with all kinds of stuff, and I'm like blown away at how folks can twist one little kernel of truth and conflate it. But that's the name of the game, and I didn't realize you were getting attacked so heavily on television. I'll have to look up some of those ads.
One of the wild things, and I'll bring up one of the ads, which is particularly wild. When I was 17 years old, I'm an immigrant. I was born in Canada, and I moved here to Florida when I was 10 years old. And when I was 17 years old, I was, I still had a green card and wasn't a citizen yet. So I couldn't have voted because I was 17, and B, because I was a citizen. So there was an article in our local paper that talked about the low voting rates. And again, as a senior in high school, I wrote a letter to the editor just talking about how I was a non-citizen and I was 17, but I really wish I could vote. And it really just pained me to see that folks hadn't voted. And I, if I was given a ballot, I'd certainly go out there and vote. Well, that letter I wrote 22 years ago was turned into me wanting non-citizens to vote. And so that was the key of a $2 to $3 million campaign attacking me for wanting non-citizens to vote. And they were literally citing an article I wrote when I was 17, 22 years ago. So, I mean, it's dirty. Politics can be pretty, can be a blood sport at times. And I certainly have learned that.
I guess the life lesson is no more letters to the editor, I guess,
yeah,
huh?
Exactly. Especially if you're in high school. Think it through.
Well, hey, don't forget, now you have tweets, and
Yes.
they will go through every single tweet. And I remember, I think this summer you had one that went viral. I forgot what it was over, but that's the nature of the game. But
Yeah.
I'm glad you put yourself out there. And I really appreciate you coming in on a night where I know I'm sure it's not a great feeling when you fall short, just like anything in life, but you're a stand-up guy. We certainly have been watching you from afar, and I certainly think if you want to do this again, you'll get support, because it was very hard to even win that primary as a
Absolutely.
first-time candidate, and you got a lot of support, and certainly you have an opportunity in the near future. But this certainly looked like a red wave in Florida specifically, no
Sure.
question.
No question. We're really thrilled of the, and we're proud of the race we ran, for sure. Regardless of the outcome, to me, it was never about me. It was about elevating our community and making sure our community got noticed, and making sure that both parties in our state actually spoke to folks in our community. And I think, we forced ourselves to be noticed, and that to me is a win.
Bagga, appreciate your time. Congratulations on a heck of a campaign, and I'm gonna YouTube some attack ads against you real soon. I'm gonna do that on my.
They're pretty funny,
next
Ravi. I'll send
opportunity.
you them.
That's great. Rishi Bagga, he ran for this seat in Florida, came up a little bit short, but still in good spirits. Hopefully we get a chance to reconnect soon in person. And have a good holiday. Take a break after a very arduous year.
Absolutely. I think I owe my wife a vacation for sure.
Amen. Rishi Bagga, thanks a lot. Appreciate the time.
Thanks so much, Ravi. Good to see you.
You too. All right, we will take a very short break and come back, as we are going to bring on a slew of folks here as we conclude our program tonight with some updates from the great state of Michigan. And of course, we're bringing on some senior leaders here that know a lot about politics on the right and the left. So we're going to conclude that show. But in the meantime, we'll take a quick commercial break and come back with more on the other side. This is Diya TV live coverage of election night. The midterm elections roll on here in a moment.
Now get free shipping on your first order.
Are you suffering from a lack of energy or the draining side effects of restless sleep? Do your resolutions always seem to fail?
What if I told you it's not your fault? It's just a part of the normal aging process. That's why I was so excited to learn about the youth hormone associated with reducing body fat, increasing lean muscle mass. It's called human growth hormone, or HGH. And as early as your mid-20s, your natural production begins to drop dramatically. The solution? Cerevital.
Cerevital is the only amino acid complex shown in a clinical trial to trigger the body's own natural release of HGH from the pituitary gland and increase mean HGH levels by an astonishing 682%. Cerevital sells for $99 in stores, but call right now because we're letting as many women as possible try Cerevital for 60 days, absolutely risk-free. This new year, make your resolutions a reality with Cerevital.
Get free shipping on your first order.
Back here live on Diya TV, coast to coast, as election night 2022 rolls on. I'm Ravi Kapur, as we have another 40 minutes or so left in this broadcast, but we have an announcement to make. It looks like we just might have another Indian American heading to Congress, and guess who's about to join us? That gentleman right now, Shri Thanedar, is joining us from Michigan in the aftermath of what appears to be a congressional victory. Shri, I'm sorry it's taken so long for us to connect, but let me be the first to congratulate you on your victory.
Ravi, thank you. Thank you so much. I am so grateful. I came here as an immigrant when I was 24 years old. And now I get a chance to represent and serve a large community, 750,000 Americans are able to serve my district. And I am, honored, and I am overwhelmed with this responsibility that I am excited to deliver for the people of my district.
Shri, for folks who aren't paying attention to Michigan that closely, certainly at a congressional level, how did you pull this off? I mean, we have Indian Americans, obviously, that have won in different ways. Ami Bera in California, Ro Khanna also in Silicon Valley, Pramila Jayapal, Raja Krishnamurthy. But you have a different story, and that's a different dynamic up in Michigan. What did you do to pull this off?
Well, two things. One is that I made sure that I am accessible. I went every possible way, knocking on doors, talking, having conversation at their front porch. I would go into, supermarkets and going to malls and going to music concerts. Anytime I can interact with people, I did that. Also, really identify with my story. Having grown up in poverty, struggling financially, growing up in Belgaum, India, and then working in offices and working as a janitor, cleaning offices. So I lived the life through the struggle. And many people in urban areas here, there is a large section of people who are also struggling, and they felt that I understand their concerns. They felt that I am the right person to help, even though I look different, I speak different, but there was a chemistry, there was a match between the population and me, because our lives and our stories connected.
Well, Shri, it wasn't a red tsunami, but certainly the GOP won a whole bunch of seats tonight. But you are definitely a surprising story as a Democrat winning in a time where the GOP had a lot of momentum. What do you plan to bring to Congress? Give folks a preview of what you're going to do when you get to Washington, because let's face it, we're in a very polarized environment, and I don't even know how many of these folks actually work together. Are you willing to work with the other side of the aisle? Tell me about your strategy when you get to D.C.
Absolutely. I am a deal maker. I am a pragmatic person. I'm a business person who ran small businesses. And, I know how to get things done. I know, because in business, I can't, I have to make payroll every 2 weeks. I got to take care of my employees. I got to take care of my customers. So I'm used to service. I'm used to helping people. I'm used to taking care of problems. So that's the work ethic I'll bring. I never miss a single day of House session, or I've never missed a vote in the Michigan Assembly where I serve as the state representative. So going into the national office, I will make sure I continue my work ethic and think about my constituents every waking hour and serving them, because I feel this is an honor, but it's also a responsibility, and I will deliver to my district.
Well, Shri, I don't want to keep you away from the festivities. I really appreciate you pulling yourself away late into the night on a historic night for you and for the Indian community at large in Michigan. Welcome to Congress. Hopefully we'll have a contingent of folks to meet with you in D.C. and I'll have a chance to do a real sit-down interview with you. But thank you so much for showing up here on your big night. Shri Thanedar, the next Indian American member of Congress. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you really for having me.
All right. Thank you, Shri, for being with us. And now we're going to go to Texas with another candidate tonight who was in the mix this evening. Salman Bhojani is joining us now from Texas. Salman, thank you so much for being here on a night where we've had a lot of Indian Americans and South Asians across the board run. Some fell short, but it looks like you are on the victorious side. Tell me about this election, and please introduce yourself to the community who may not know your story.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Salman Bhojani. I'm running for the Texas House in District 92. And we've got the early voting and the mail-in ballots here, and we're about 14% lead for our opponent. And so that's going to be really difficult to catch up on election day itself. And looking forward to representing the District 92 as well. My story is basically I was born in Pakistan, moved to America when I was 19 years old, and worked at a gas station mopping floors for $6 an hour. And then I moved up, became a cashier, then a manager, and bought 9 gas stations. I had 4 of them, and I decided to put myself through law school at SMU with an evening program, and then went to work for a great law firm called Haynes & Boone, and then started my own practice in 2015. And then 2016 is when I got politically active, when we elected a former president. And I ran for U.S. City Council in 2018 and became the first minority ever elected in the U.S. City Council. And then I became the mayor pro tem as well. I was elected actually Republican City Council members elected me as mayor pro tem. And then I started my journey to run for the State House. And it's been really a long journey so far. It's been a year and a half since I've been running. And so I have a lot of, put in a lot of work, and I have knocked on a lot of doors and reached out to different voters. But looking forward to serving the people of District 92 and also we're making history because I'll be the first Muslim and the first South Asian ever elected in the history of the state of Texas to the Texas legislature. I'll also be making history by being the first person of color to represent District 92. It's never been represented by a minority. So looking forward to that.
That's a big milestone. I mean, you just heard, hopefully had a chance to hear Shri Thanedar, another Indian American heading to Congress, and you representing the great state of Texas. Tell me about your strategy. I mean, this was a big night for the GOP. There were obviously Democrats that got elected across the board. We're seeing all these different wedge issues. What was your messaging like to get you over the hump tonight?
Yeah, basically my message was to reduce the partisan rhetoric that we have, especially in the state of Texas. It's controlled by Republicans, and there's been a lot of partisan rhetoric coming down, laws about open carry, abortion access, and just voting rights, pushing our voting rights as well. But my message has been try to work with Republicans across the aisle that are moderate, trying to figure out how we can build a coalition and work on kitchen table issues. I'm not focusing my campaign, and I've not been talking to voters about partisan issues. It's more about having a good economy, which is good paying jobs, and then also having access to healthcare, and then education, and fully funding our schools. We are right now the 9th largest. If Texas was a separate country itself, it would be the 9th largest country in the world in terms of GDP. And so why can we not afford a world-class school? And that's what my message was.
And in Texas, what kind of dynamic are you seeing there in terms of the South Asian community? We had Chanda Parbhoo on earlier tonight talking about her efforts to do outreach. It's kind of unheralded, the community. We don't talk about the Texas Desi community that much, but obviously we know Houston and Dallas have enormous communities, and it's emerging in Austin and San Antonio. Tell us about your community a little bit, because I think we have a lot of folks from around the country that are getting a sense that, hey, we have a pretty big dynamic growing in Washington State, in Florida, Texas, all over this country.
Yeah, Texas, I think it has about 700 to 800,000 South Asians, and there are a lot of population in Houston, but not as much in North Texas, especially in my district. So my district has, I would say, Desis, about 2 to 3% Desis, not much. And so I've gotten a lot of support from the general Caucasian, Anglo community, African American community, and the Hispanic community. Hispanic community is the biggest in our district. 33% are Hispanic community members. And so this is a minority majority district, a Democratic seat that was created Democratic. And so we're flipping that seat from Republican to Democrat. But yeah, not as much Desis in my district. In Dallas Fort Worth area, generally there are a lot of, like, especially in Collin County where Chanda was maybe referring to.
Well, that's right. Well, I know it's great to see that we have so many folks running for offices all over the place, and I really appreciate you taking some time. It looked like you were coming away from a campaign victory party. We've had people attending parties all over this country, and I appreciate it getting a few minutes with you. Congratulations on a big accomplishment, the first South Asian heading to the Texas legislature. Salman Bhojani, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much. And we're going to move forward now with another gentleman that you've seen on Diya TV over the years, and we're going to wrap up our programming having a couple of guys that you've seen on and off over the years. And Shekar Narasimhan is going to join us now from the AAPI Victory Fund. Shekar, it's always great to see you. I know you're heavily involved and you're invested in all of these races, not just things involved in the South Asian community, but I wanted to get your sense of how the night has gone. We've been so enraptured with talking to all these different candidates and all the folks doing things at grassroots level. Really, I mean, I really like to talk about what the lobbyists are doing, what the bundlers are doing, all the grassroots folks, and of course the electeds. Give me your take on election 22, what you've seen tonight.
Sure. Ravi, nice to see you, and great to have an audience that's listening and saying I'm engaged in politics and care about this country. But let me start by correcting something. I heard you several times when you're talking to these amazing Indian American candidates who are winning, talking about, there's been a Republican wave. No, there was no wave. What they did, if you just look at the numbers, it started with the Republicans having 50 Senate seats, the Democrats having 50 Senate seats. There's a reasonable chance there's a runoff in Georgia. And if there is, and I think you could end up with a 50-50 Senate again. In a typical midterm where the president is of one party, the other party tends to win 2 to 3 Senate seats and up to 30 on average House seats. I think the Republicans are going to win the control of the House, but probably no more than 12 seats. So look, is that a great outcome? No, it makes life very difficult to do. But flip side is that if you're a business person, you say, look, there's divided government. Let them figure it out. Let them work together. As long as they're not crazy, I'm happy. Because, most likely my taxes don't go up. Most likely the country stays sort of in the center, left, center, middle, and we'll go fight it out again in 2024. People have, I think, accepted that there is some necessity to work together, that there's a need for moderation, and that some of the rhetoric on the right and on the left just doesn't make any sense and actually doesn't produce reform. And I think that if that's a lesson I'm getting out of this election, I'm very happy to hear it. I see that all over the country in our community where people talk about all the major economic issues, but they also talk about the damage, the discussion of cultural wars, immigration, and other issues are. And people say, I wish we'd just stop with the politics and talk about the problems and how people are going to solve them. So, Ravi, I think I like the fact that this is a mixed bag result. I'm not shocked by it, and I'm kind of pleased that we are in this place in this country where we can actually protect our democracy and believe in voting and have our community this heavily engaged.
So do you think the Democrats are going to hold on to the U.S. Senate?
I think it'll be 50-50 at the end of the day, and that means with the vice president being a Democrat, Kamala Harris will again continue to cast a tie-breaking vote when necessary. Yes. So that means control, yes.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the left. I know you're a Democrat and you support Democratic causes, but I haven't seen a whole lot of Democrats denounce kind of the extreme left. Certainly, there was good reason to denounce the extreme right that we've seen during the previous administration and some of the hateful rhetoric and some of that stuff that we experienced during the Trump administration. But I think less so. I think we've seen a lot of progressive politics that seemingly have gone haywire in places like Seattle, which maybe have influenced this election. I mean, give me your thoughts on that, because we haven't seen a whole lot of folks call that part of the equation out.
I don't know what we need to do to convince people across the board that the rhetoric on both fringes are damaging. First of all, they're damaging to our country, they're damaging to our democracy. You can't say, I'm not trying to overthrow the government and then invade the US Capitol. You can't, on the other hand, turn around and say, we're going to defund the police, and then say that I'm in favor of crime. I'm in favor of crime prevention. So this kind of language, the use of language, and then the exaggeration about the amount of rhetoric that's used is really damaging. So no, yes, there are some Democrats that say we are socialists. I don't think the vast majority of Democrats believe that they are socialists and want to redistribute wealth. Most of us came to this country believing really strongly that if we worked hard, we studied hard, we brought up our children well, we saved money, we ran our own businesses, which is what I am and most of us are, and you are, Ravi, as a business guy. We want to save money, leave an inheritance, but we also care about our country. And the last thing we need is the government interfering in every single aspect of our lives, whether it is in business regulation or frankly in a woman's right to choose, saying things like having to get permission for women to be able to work. I mean, what kind of society are we living in? In which century do we want to live in? So I wish we could stop on both. But if you're asking me, do I think that, I think the rhetoric on the left about socialism, about immediately transitioning to a clean economy so that we don't have the energy independence we have today, or defunding the police and others are also absolutely asinine and wrong, I would say that emphatically. Yes, we have to stop that rhetoric, and we have to stop thinking that those are solutions to problems, because they don't help people on the street.
Well, it's an interesting perspective. Is the White House listening to you? Because obviously we've seen some of the policies that the White House has implemented that it clearly has offended some folks, right? I mean, why would we have such a red wave? We had Karthick Ramakrishnan on earlier from AAPI Data, and he said it would have been a much bigger red wave had the abortion battle not be front and center a few months ago, and triggering folks to make sure they continue to vote for the Democrats in this cycle. I mean, certainly, where did the Democrats lose momentum? I mean, it seemed like as soon as Biden and the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate, the message just flipped almost immediately, and it became a really anti-democratic movement from almost the moment he got inaugurated. So at what point did you guys lose the message? Because obviously the outcome tonight is certainly not what you wanted.
The outcome is not what we wanted, but again, I want to point out that it is significantly better than any other president since before Ronald Reagan in terms of a midterm where you control all the aspects of government. People really do like balance. This is what America is saying again and again. We don't mind having a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature, or a Democratic president and one house controlled by Republicans, because it creates balance. Even if there are crazies in both sides, they tend to get overridden by the middle, because the middle realizes you got to function. And before you go back to the electorate, you have to have something to show for why you got there. If I'm paying you a paycheck and I'm hiring you, I expect you to perform something for me, not just rhetoric. So I think the country's message is pretty clear, right? So when you ask, did it go off the rails? Yes and no. I mean, you have many aspects to every party. There is an extreme right, there's an extreme left, there's a middle, and there's a center, and it happens to exist in both parties. So I don't think that anything ever went off the rails. I think we do a lousy job of talking about what we get done, and we don't go out there and actually just run on good governance. People do react to what's going on. There is inflation, okay? Prices have gone up a lot. You can see there are 900,000 gas signs in the United States. You can see that gas prices are up. There's no secret to that. The question is, why do we talk about energy independence in the same breath as a clean economy and climate change? Yes, you should be talking about climate change. It is an existential threat. You should talk about clean energy, but let's talk about transitions, not about radically suddenly stopping all exploration and getting. We got to this great place of energy independence as a country. We've got to maintain that. So we need to give people a long view of how we execute policy. So anyway, I just hope that the center holds in both sides, that the rhetoric doesn't overcome it, Ravi. And that this election says to me, center, left or right, hold. Business people, step up and start using your voice to try to get people to shut up and stop the rhetoric.
Well, Shekar, a couple of years ago, we had a gentleman on at the same time as you did, and he's joining us now. A couple of years ago, it was kind of like a victory party for you and and the Democrats. And this time out, we have Shalli Kumar joining us from the Republican Hindu Coalition. We appreciate you coming on here from the Midwest. We've had people from all over the country. Shalli, if you can kind of tilt your camera towards us a little bit so we can see you, because we're just a little bit offline. There we go. Yeah, why don't you sit up a little bit closer? Move just a little bit more. There we go. Now we can see you.
Hi,
There we go.
Shalli. How are you doing, buddy?
Hello, gentlemen.
I'm good. How are you?
Great to see you. I had a chance to see both of you here recently. Shalli has been making the rounds with the GOP, throwing not just an event at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump for Diwali, but he had a private event at Bedminster. I had a chance to interview President Trump back in September, courtesy of Shalli and his efforts. Tell me your thoughts on tonight, Shekar. I guess all things considered, the Democrats did not lose as many seats as potentially projected, but of course the GOP looks like they're taking back the House. Give us your thoughts, Shalli.
First of all, sorry for being late. And actually, I've been crisscrossing the country. So I was in Phoenix and in Pennsylvania, and so this morning early I had to get up. So anyway, I'm not totally familiar with what is going on this evening yet. I understand the House we're going to take. The Senate is still in the balance, and I heard Shekar, a dear friend and always voice of reason. So that's that the country should be moving in the middle. One of the things which I would like to say is hopefully maybe President Biden replaces Salman Ahmed with Shekar. So we will have a little more balance in the foreign policy in South Asia. So, and in general, I think President Biden, when he was a senator, he was sort of more of a moderate in the center guy, but in the last 2 years, he has governed much more as a kind of ultra leftist, as if he's just a incarnation of reincarnation or incarnation of Bernie Sanders. So hopefully, maybe he'll move to the center. And I hear that the stock market is going to do very good because they like divided government, that nobody does excesses. So maybe that's what's going to happen.
Well, I think Shekar brought that point up. The business leaders will appreciate this outcome, right? Because we've had interest rates rise. Shekar, I mean, both of you could speak about this at length, I'm sure. So let's forecast that this is a divided government. The House going to the GOP, the Senate, let's say it's 50-50. What do you both forecast the next couple of years? Shekar, we'll start with you. Biden had the House, had the Senate. Certainly, I wouldn't say it's a total repudiation, but there were folks that certainly I think I've heard Shalli's take on this from a number of people saying Biden is a moderate. We wanted a moderate in office, and it seemed like everything went very left. Beyond what anyone thought. What do you say to that criticism?
Well, look, any criticism, look, if you want to get into the public eye, you're going to take a lot of stuff. So take it, So I'm not worried that he was criticized, and he shouldn't be, frankly. But look at what control meant. A 50-50 Senate means you can't lose one vote. A House where you have a 5-vote margin, and at periods there was a 3-vote margin, means you better placate everybody. Okay, so it becomes a Christmas tree. I come to you and say, Shalli, what would you like? Because if you like it, you'll vote for it. Come on, Ravi, you add something to it. Suddenly you have this big thing being built that, I may only like half of it, but I'm going to have to take the other half to get it done. So that's why I said it's not the end of the world if they have the House. The Republicans are going to have the same difficulty with the House. They're going to have, it looks like, Shalli, normally in a midterm, a president of one party loses the House by 30 seats. It looks like your party's going to gain 12 to 13 seats. So Kevin McCarthy is going to have to manage that. He's going to have to figure out how to bring all these people together to vote. And so it's not easy to govern. And then you still could have a 50-50 Senate where, you can't lose one vote on either side if you're going to block something or you're going to make something happen. So it just means that the president, who did get some bipartisan stuff done, okay? There was an infrastructure bill. There was a CHIPS bill. Stuff has gotten done that was not, has been on the anvil for many, many, many years. I hope what they do, and what I would advocate, is pick 3 spots. Don't pick 12 things. Let's do something about inflation, prices. Let's address the issue that there's an awful lot of people in America that need retraining, something, Shalli, you talk about a lot. We've got 10 million jobs. We've got, like 14 million people looking for them at most. The problem is those 10 million jobs require skills that those 14 don't have. People get left behind. So let's focus on a couple of high-level priorities, sit down with everybody in a room, and even if they're yelling and screaming, let them yell and scream, but try to come up with something modest and things that actually help people. And if we do that in both domestic policy and foreign policy, we'll be way better off as a country. That's what I hope happens.
Charlie?
Well, one thing for sure is going to happen is all these investigations that don't do anything, they're going to stop. So maybe they'll start constructive work. We talk about infrastructure bill. There's a lot of fake provisions in that infrastructure bill. That is your Made in America provision. And actually, Shekar was going to work on it. Maybe they'll take him a little more seriously. That let's make sure that the provisions for Made in America products in the infrastructure bill do not get overridden by federal agency heads. So something like that could work. And I think another thing which Kevin McCarthy wanted, which I would be totally in favor of. I don't understand this concept of having another 80,000 IRS agents. I think we have too many IRS agents to begin with that intimidate particularly small businesses. So I think that was one of the things which Kevin McCarthy had pledged that he was going to eliminate or going to veto down again. So some of those things are possible. Again, I think if in the next 2 years we govern from the middle, that'll be much better. And I hope Biden administration starts to listen a lot more to people like Shekar.
Gentlemen, since I got you both here, I wanted to quickly ask you about Shri Thanedar. He got elected tonight, another Indian American heading to Congress. He's a Democrat. What is it about the Democratic Party that seems to get all these Indian Americans over the hump here? I mean, we have a lot of Indian Republicans now. Certainly, Shalli's introduced me to a bunch. What is it about the Democratic Party that somehow this dynamic has worked out where we have more and more folks entering Congress? Go ahead, Shekar, go ahead.
No, I want Shalli to answer that first, actually.
You have an advantage over me at this point in time because I don't know that particular race. as to what has happened, there is good. Actually, if we have more Indian Americans, Hindu Americans in Congress, so we have a voice. So that's the more the better. That's good.
The secret there, Shekar. I know have some insight on this.
Sure. Yeah, I met Shri, in fact, on Sunday at an event that we did with Vice President Harris and a whole group of leaders. We'd invited him because we wanted him to sort of experience what, hopefully a platform and an opportunity to get on the issues. Look, I like the fact that he's a business guy. I like the fact that he has come up through the ranks. He was a state delegate before that. I don't know what all his skill sets and his value equations are. I strongly suspect he became a Democrat because that's how, he came to this country. And, we do have a very significant percentage of Indian Americans that have grown up as Democrats because they saw themselves in the picture. And so if the Republicans and if Shalli just makes sure there's a ton of brown people in the pictures, people will start to say, hey, I can belong there too. But clearly we do a better job as Democrats on that. What we can do a lot better collectively is work on issues around immigration and things that really affect the relationship between India and the United States, and make sure those are more bipartisan and they're constructively done in a way that quite honestly stand the test of time, so it doesn't get reversed by the next administration or the next Congress. So I'm hoping that people like Shri Thanedar actually do that. Look, the Georgia race is going to end up in a runoff because neither Walker nor Warnock's going to end up at 50%. So depending on whether it's already 50-49 one way or the other, that race will attract a lot of attention. There's a huge South Asian and Indian American community in DeKalb and Fulton and Gwinnett. Shalli, join me there. Let's go battle this one out and see who wins. But I strongly suspect that if we won last time, we can win again. And the Shri Thanedars of the world will show us the way.
I'll tell you what, we were involved in that 2020 battle between Warnock and Ossoff. We saw that firsthand, those runoffs. We have a station in Atlanta. So I think it is likely to go towards a runoff. And just to give you a quick update on the stat that we just got, Herschel Walker is leading right now with 49.2% of the vote, 87% reporting. But it looks like he is, at least as of right now, he's likely to beat Warnock, who of course was just elected 2 years ago. But if this ends up in a runoff, we all three of us could be in Georgia for the next.
In Georgia, it requires you have to hit 50%, and there's a third-party candidate that has 2%. So neither one of them can get to 50. So it will end up in a runoff. I look forward to the battle. I know we can win it. So.
Well, one of the things which Ravi, you got quite a bit involved in as when we interviewed, or you interviewed me and President on Dalka issue. And I know Shekar is for Dalka.
Very much so.
I had all the Senate candidates that we were responsible for take a pledge that they will support Dalka. So that's, one of the things which we could solve the problem of 250,000 Indian American kids.
We have 48 Democrats who will support it, and I think 7 Republicans right now. We need 3 more Republican senators, and let's get it done. We can do it in the lame duck, Shalli. Let's go to work and show we can work together and get stuff done.
That's a great point you're both bringing up. Can we actually get something done during this lame duck session? I mean, I've asked every politician now over the last 6 months about this green card backlog. It's now become a core issue. We've talked to the young man, Deep Patel out of Chicago with, I think it's called Improve the Dream.
Right.
So you have young kids who are Democrats, you have Republicans who are all on the same page. What can we do? Can we help get this issue across the finish line before the lame duck ends?
I'm told that there is an amendment that has been written. We have senators ready to go on our side. That it's an amendment to what is called the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, which is must-pass legislation. So it will come to the floor. There will be 4 days of debates. The question is, can we get, if you have 10 Republican senators, including Senator Grassley, who's chairman of the Judiciary Committee, agree that it can come to the floor, then you're going to get 60 votes, which is what it requires, because otherwise, that makes it filibuster proof in order to get it to the floor and get it voted on. So I would just ask Shalli, can we get Senator Grassley to support it? Because I think they have most of the support. I strongly believe it'll pass. And there's already an amendment, and I know we have the support of the Democratic leadership to do this. So we need Senator Grassley and Senator McConnell, and this thing can get done in the lame duck. We can show success working together right now.
Well, I do not know about the lame duck. Again, I'm sorry, I don't have the overall picture right now.
Okay.
And see as President Trump, he himself promised you, Ravi, that you asked him, would you use his bully pulpit to push it through? And so we certainly will try that.
Well, we need to have all these elected officials held accountable, and I'm so glad this is an issue that we've honestly been talking about for years, but I think finally I see some momentum, and some of the young folks that reach out to us. I mean, just harrowing stories of kids who are 20 years old. They have their whole life in front of them. They're going to college, and all of a sudden they have a roadblock where they have to self-deport at 21. It's just unbelievable considering how dynamic some of these kids are. Before we go, I want to give you both a quick update. It looks like all the Indian American incumbents in Congress are all going to get reelected. Ro Khanna is up big. Raja Krishnamurthy is up. Ami Bera and Pramila Jayapal. It also looks like John Fetterman in Pennsylvania at the moment is leading with 77% of precincts reporting. And J.D. Vance is going to win Ohio. And he's going to be the next senator of Ohio. And of course, his wife, Usha, is Indian American. So many different storylines here. Give us your takeaway before we wrap up the broadcast. Shalli, your takeaway from election 2022.
Well, it looks like we are moving in the center. There's no red wave, there's no blue wave. Seems like the country wants to be in the center. So that's good.
I think there's an American wave and there's an Indian wave right behind it. But Ravi, thank you for all you do, because it's much appreciated.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you coming on late. Shalli, I know, and Shekar, it's both very late out there for you, and I know it's hard to coordinate all these folks, but we've had a heck of a broadcast. I really appreciate everybody coming on from coast to coast. I don't think we hit 50 states, but we hit probably a dozen. Not bad for a 3-hour broadcast that we do biannually. So thanks for everybody tuning in tonight, coast to coast, on the air, online. I'm Ravi Kapur for the entire Diya TV team. Thanks for joining us, and continuing coverage on air and online here on Diya TV.